We're good.
Okay, great. Good evening and welcome to the Paso Robles Planning Commission of Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2023. I'm Mark Kugler, Chair, and I'd invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd stand and remove your hats, I'd appreciate it.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mark, I think we need some more volume.
Great. Thank you. Item C on our agenda is roll call. If staff would please conduct the roll call.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
I'm here.
Commissioner Davis?
I'm here.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Here.
Commissioner Gibson?
Present.
Commissioner Neal?
Here.
Commissioner Christensen? Chairperson Kogler?
Here.
So the record will reflect that Covarrubias is attending remotely and Christensen is absent.
Very good. Thank you. Would you handle staff introductions, please, Mr. Price?
Warren Frace, Community Development Director.
Marcy Reynoso and Ashley Peterson, Administrative Assistants.
Darren Nash, City Planner.
David Athey, City Engineer.
This is Annie Brandon from the City Attorney's Office.
Edie Bannister, Associate Planner.
All accounted for? Great. Thank you all. Okay, item E on our agenda is general public comments regarding matters that are not on the agenda. If anybody has an item they would like to bring to the attention of the commission that's not on the agenda this evening, please approach the podium, state your name and address, and you'll have a few minutes to tell us your thoughts. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Jerry Eckert, and I live on Vine Street. My family and I purchased a Victorian on Vine Street, and we're in the process of trying to make it into an Airbnb. We've completed all the renovations, filed our application to have it licensed. And the problem I'm running up against, I can't find the status of my application. So can anybody help me with that? It's been like a couple weeks, and no one seems to be able to give me any information.
Yes, Mr. Nash.
Ms. Ecker, if you leave me your phone number, I'd be happy to check into that and have someone give you a call back tomorrow, if that's okay.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
But we definitely are familiar with the applications and the process, so we'll check it out and have somebody give you a call.
Okay, my phone number is...
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other items? Do you have anybody calling in, Marcy, with any?
No callers.
Great, thank you. Okay, item F on our agenda are items that are proposed to be tabled or rescheduled. Do we have any of those this evening?
There are none.
Okay, very good. Then we will move into kind of the heart of the agenda, public hearings, of which we have 5 this evening. The first hearing is for ABI Office Shop Structure, PD 20-17, CUP 21-21, P20-0085. Property is located at 70 Nutwood Circle, APN 009-851-016. The applicant is ABI Construction, Mr. Andy Brown. If we could start with a staff report, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Darren Nash, City Planner. This item, as you mentioned, is for the ABI construction project. This is the project that came before the Planning Commission, I believe last summer, then went on to the City Council. The reason it went to the City Council was the request for the use of septic based on this proximity of this site being away from the existing city sewer system. So the project went from the Planning Commission on up to the City Council where it was approved. So the site is it's at the south end of town off of Theater Drive. This is close to the southerly boundary of the city limits and the county limits. Also comes across that north-south line on the east side there is the boundary, city boundary to the west. The site here at the end of the Nutwood Circle there There are 3 parcels. The site that we're looking at here tonight, and then there's 2 parcels on the south side of, get to this page. So if you look here in the pink area is the properties within the city limits. The one we're looking at is the red boundary. The property on the south side is now 2 separate parcels, is in the city as well. The white properties on the west side of the line there is a residential subdivision that is in the county. Originally, this project, this properties were in the county, including the properties that are currently shown in the city, where there was a subdivision, and the Nutwood Road was part of that original subdivision. Later on, the properties in the pink were further subdivided with the parcel that was shown here, and then there was a hotel project at the time proposed that was approved in the city some time ago that did never move forward. So with Mr. Brown's project, there was the request of and the requirement and the discussion of the maintenance of the Nutwood Circle. At the time of the Planning Commission meeting, the neighbors from the neighborhood, the residential neighbors to the west came in attendance and asked about the maintenance. The condition was placed on the project for the 3 commercial property owners within city limits to get together for a maintenance district for that portion of Nutwood Circle that would be in city limits. So here, the condition number 16, which we're just speaking of tonight, is related to this portion of the road. And the condition was for Mr. Brown with his property. And then there's Mr. Ayers has a project on this parcel. And then there's a Peterbilt project. Both of those projects will be coming back before the Planning Commission in the near future. But the request at the time was to get those property owners within the city to come up with an agreement for maintenance of that road in city limits. So this is the condition that was placed to take the necessary steps to come up with that agreement between those properties. And then what we've been working with Mr. Brown, he's in the process of, he actually has a grading permit. We've worked with him to issue a grading permit. We've met with him. We've met with some of the other property owners to try and discuss this and figure out a way to proceed with the projects and encourage, as on behalf of the city, the execution of the agreement. But there's been challenges for that, getting all the property owners involved, and then the property owners in the neighborhood to the west in the county are also involved at this time, but I'll let Mr. Brown kind of explain that process. We did receive a letter from Tom Madden, the attorney on behalf of Mr. Brown. There's a draft road maintenance agreement. They're having some challenges trying to get everybody on board to sign that. And that's really why we're here tonight. The request is for the Planning Commission to remove the condition, or at least make a recommendation to the City Council to remove the condition for this maintenance. And then it will need to go to the City Council for an action based on another public hearing. But what we're looking for tonight is the Planning Commission to make a recommendation or not. Either way, it'll move forward to the City Council. This copy of the letter that was attached. So again, what we're looking for is a discussion on this condition. I think the main thing is to listen to Mr. Brown, and he's going to be able to tell us, the challenges and, how close it is to being resolved or not. And then this matter will go up to the City Council. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Darren. Questions, or shall we hear from the applicant first? Commissioner Davis, question?
Darren, can you, so just to clarify, we're just talking about condition 16 tonight. We're not opening up anything else, just the road maintenance.
That's correct. We're focused on the discussion of condition 16.
I was out there today and it looks like it's ready to go. Can you give me an update, or maybe Mr. Brown can, on the infrastructure improvements to date?
Yes, as I mentioned, the grading permit's been issued. Mr. Brown's anxious to get the construction to start going in this condition and is holding him up. I'll let him.
It looks like he's ready to go. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about that. Thank you.
Any others before we bring on?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
could we enter into the record that Commissioner Christensen has joined the meeting?
yes, please do.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Brown, do you have comments you'd like to provide to the commission? Please state your full name and address.
Sure. Andy Brown, 70 Nutwood. Yeah, this has been kind of an ongoing thing for ever since we left here in the original planning commission meeting. It's been very taxing for me. I thought we were right here and finished. I had Mr. Madden draw a draft. The city reviewed it, approved it, sent it out to the homeowners association and Mr. Ayers and Mr. Archer. I got comments back from Mr. Archer and, saying that he didn't think he should pay for the whole 25% of the quarters between the four parties and wanted to split it up into less. There's really no clean cut way to make that work. It's either you're in kind of or you're out. I get it. We're at the back a lot. We're at lot 2 on that map. We're at the back of it. He's at the front of it. He's not going to drive on half a Nutwood circle. But there's no way to apportion it. Traffic indexes and everything else. If we went back to that, I would pay less because I have the least amount of impact in my business compared to what they're stating. I thought we were real close. We got Mr. Archer and Mr. Ayers to agree on some stuff. Went back to the homeowners association because they utilized that road for, I believe, 18 or 19 homes up there. And then that's where it kind of fell apart. They've been very, very forthcoming. We have great discussions. Nothing's gotten, there's no tension or anything like that. It's just getting 4 separate entities to get to a deciding factor. I've bared all the expenses up front from this. I haven't asked anybody to pay for any of the times for the drafts or anything like that. But to condition my project that I can't get a building permit, which Ms. Davis over there went out there today, I'm ready to build if I could get my building permit from the city. There's been a few hiccups in plan check. I think we're on a 5th round plan check right now for some reason. But I was told that those comments, my engineer is going to bring back the last 2, and this city building's going to work in-house to get that retrofitted back to hopefully approved. But I still, if we don't get this cleared up, I'm still waiting. So I've been working on this before COVID. There's a lot of different stuff that's been in the works in here between sewers, water mains, and everything else. When this was annexed into the city had every idea that they were going to assume Nutwood Circle in the hotel project. When the hotel project fell apart, they changed their mind, which they had full authority to do at the time. And then now you left a piece that was annexed into the city, but without a road maintenance agreement. So it's just sitting there. And nobody's ever done anything with it. The homeowners have bared the expense to seal coat the road. I think at the end of the day, that nobody wants to see this road maintenance agreement be finished more than me. I want to pay my 25%. I think it's fair and equitable, but getting everybody to get away from speculation and an agreement and actual stated facts that this is how we're going to pay for it, not if this looks like you caused damage or I caused damage, who's paying for that. We were all on board, and then it kind of fell apart. I'm hopes to finish this, but it is holding up my project, and it is costing me financial hardship at this point. Every day that we don't start this thing is a day lost that I'm not utilizing it. Be more than happy to answer any questions you guys have. So,
Thank you. We'll call on you if we do have some questions. So it is the appropriate time for the commission to ask questions of staff and/or supplemented by the applicant. Let's start with Commissioner Covarrubias from above.
I appreciate that, Chairperson Kogler. Hey, Andy, quick question. You mentioned that the draft has already been approved. Who within the city approved it already?
We'll either need to address it at the microphone or have staff address the question.
Andy Brown, 70 Nutwood. It went to Mr. Frace.
Okay, all right. I was just curious. Okay, so it's been reviewed by city staff and it's been at least verbally acknowledged that it was adequate.
The first draft, if we keep going with it, there will be corrections.
Okay, got you. Curious, Darren, what happens to the road maintenance agreement? Let's assume we push this to the city council, and the council approves it. What then happens to the portion of Nutwood Circle as far as the maintenance? Are the homeowners then responsible as they are now?
Commissioner Covarrubias, is your question if this goes to city council and the city council approves removal of the requirement?
Yes, if they remove the requirement that Andy come up with a road maintenance agreement that is shared, and it's approved that he no longer has to do that, what then happens to that portion of Nutwood Circle?
So
the portion that's in city limits.
Commissioner Covarrubias, Warren Frace. So Nutwood Circle, that property is owned by the owner of Lot 1 to the south, which has been split into two. It's not shown on this map that way. Do you have the correct exhibit there, Darren? So just we can see. Yeah, go back. That one will work. Okay, so the parcel that to the south that's closest to Theater Drive owns Nutwood Circle. So without a road maintenance agreement or any other agreements in place, the property owner would be ultimately responsible for the road maintenance.
Got it. I appreciate that clarity, Warren. Thank you very much. Last question, I guess, for anybody in staff. Have we had any kind of scenario like this in the past within our city where we have a city/county road maintenance issue? Is anybody aware of anything like this previously?
There's a number of areas in town where the streets weren't originally accepted by the city for maintenance, or they're kind of straddling city and county lines. So it's fairly common throughout the town in those conditions to have concerns and issues with long-term maintenance.
Okay. I have no other questions. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Commissioner Covarrubias. Commissioner Davis, questions?
Sherry.
Darren, correct me if I'm wrong. I really want to see this project go forward, but I'm trying to work through some things. Am I correct in that with Mr. Brown putting in infrastructure, those others will benefit from that? I don't know what the cost sharing is, but going first, there's some benefit to the other parcel owners.
Yeah, Dave Athey, can you describe the utility situation? I know this is private, and the ABI project is bringing in some water. I know obviously sewer is not available, but I think the question was, is there utilities being put in that the other two parcels on the south side of Nutwood are going to benefit from?
Yes, Mr. Brown has actually got plans and a permit to install a water line up Nutwood to about the middle property line between the two southern properties. And the other two will be conditioned to participate. And Mr. Brown also has the ability to file a reimbursement agreement to get reimbursed when they connect to that water line.
I'm just seeing some hardship, and he's leading the way, and I really don't want to see this postponed. I don't want to see his plant development delayed. So I was trying to figure out what kind of benefit to the other parcel owners and how we could get them motivated to kind of come on board. That was where my question was coming from. Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Warren or Darren, if the city decided it was willing to conduct the maintenance as needed on this road, what would be involved with that?
It would have to be accepted as a public street, which typically requires it to be built to a public street standards, which we don't believe it currently is at that standard. So there's a number of issues that would likely have to be resolved for the city to actually consider that question. And then the city would be accepting all liability and maintenance on this property.
Okay, so it's possible the road would have to be reconstructed, first of all, and then on long-term maintenance.
Those are just all the issues that would have to be part of an analysis
decision.
of that.
Okay. But it's conceivable, even though it wouldn't be a clean or simple process.
Well, the council has discretion to accept any property they want.
Okay, I guess that's kind of what I'm asking. All right,
Might
thank
not
you.
be consistent with their policy.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Commissioner Davis.
David, can you respond? The condition of the road looked pretty good to me today. What's your opinion on it?
It looks pretty good. I'm not a pavement engineer. If we wanted to get an evaluation, we could get that done through.
I'm just thinking if we could get things moving forward and let the agreement eventually come forward. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's in horrible state right now. So I was wanting a professional opinion. My opinion and my Explorer, it looked like it was pretty smooth.
Yeah, I haven't really looked at it that closely to be able to do that.
All right, thank you.
But there's no potholes as far as I know. There are some block cracking. I can just see off the.
I think everyone
here,
wants it in good, but it seemed to be in good state, in my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Christensen, questions?
I apologize for being late. Andy, if you don't mind, I just a couple reminders for me and just kind of refreshing from the original aspect of the project. When you bought the property, Nutwood Circle being private, was that a granted easement on Nutwood Circle at that time?
Andy Brown, 70 Nutwood. I have, I believe, a 60-foot easement down Nutwood that actually we had to go before we closed escrow and get recorded from another parcel owner at the time that owned Nutwood. So I have a 60-foot easement that goes all the way up Nutwood. And being part of Track 1699, that grants you use of that road because you are part of Track 1699, which is the lots of the houses. Because I was lot 2 of that. It's been redone since the split, I believe. So maybe I am still 2, but so I guess if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that
utility easement and I pretty much a blanket easement on Nutwood.
Right, and so, and again, thank you for refreshing my memory because I'm going back far. I'm trying to remember a lot of the details, and it's easier for you to explain it. So, and with that agreement or easement, it wasn't an agreement. There were no other specifications for you as part of that?
No, the original developers owned all of that property there that you see that's not part of the northern side of Nutwood other than my lot. And when they did that, for some reason, they left those 3 parcels out of any road maintenance agreement. I'd have to err a side of caution in my opinion that they didn't want to pay any money on it at the time. So when it was split in the county, that's how it was split, and there's nothing in title because I've researched it looking for will serve letters from Walnut Hills Mutual Water to serve because I have it's there.
Sure.
But I couldn't find those anything, and there's nothing. I've had my attorney search it to see if we could dig anything up that actually showed some sort of an agreement, and it doesn't exist.
Understand. I think I remember that from the original submission through DRC and some of the other questions we had at that time.
And I think when they brought, this is my opinion, but I think when they brought it into the city, when the hotel project was going to go, none of this was going to be a problem because that road was going to be assumed by the city. It's crossed out and then written in private on the actual recorded map.
Okay. And and I remembered, again, I'm just trying to refresh my memory here. So at the meeting, or even at the DRC meeting or the DRC notes and from the commission meeting, it had seemed as if there was, the neighbors were here and that they had felt that you've been working very diligently towards that. So the maintenance agreement basically is something that transpired because of the submission to the city for the building and plant. plan.
I think originally by the support of all the neighbors that came in here wanting a fix to their problem, right?
Sure,
So,
yeah.
and I'm still 100% on board. I'm not trying to skate on any maintenance or anything like that. I just, it's hamstringing me for my building permit now.
Yeah.
So I can't go vertical until this either gets fixed, changed, however we want to word it. But if you notice, I don't think there's a single homeowner here tonight. That shows you what kind of good faith they have in me, because they all got notified. I talked to the president of the homeowner association and the vice president and everything, and I assured them that I wasn't running away from them or Mr. Archer or Mr. Ayers. I just need something to be able to get me a tangible building permit so I can build this thing.
All right, well, hey, thanks for refreshing my memory on that. I appreciate it. I don't have any questions of Andy right now.
Okay.
And I'll reserve, I might have another question a little bit later. I need to go back and look at my notes, so.
Okay. Mr. Neal.
So I'm gathering from reading the letter from the attorney that the negotiations just started in December from 2022 when the agreement was sent. I'm thinking, I suspect they turned in the plan check or the drawings before then. So I'm just wondering why it took so long to start the process, and if I am mistaken in the fact that the first agreement was sent in 2022.
Andy Brown, 70 Nutwood. No, the date that Tom has in there is when we finalized, I think, the first draft. I've been in negotiations between the homeowners and the two parcel owners for at least, I can't hold me to dates, but I'm going to say at least 12 months. At least. It took a long time to get to where we could get to a draft. And the problem being, and this is what we all have to remember, we have to be very cut and dry in this draft, right? Okay, I have a construction yard, but I have 3 or 4 full-time people that drive to that every day. Mr. Archer in the front is going to run a Peterbilt dealership that could have 500 people driving that every day. So we have to split this up, and everybody, we were on the same page, you just go percentages, 25%. And then in the end, they wanted to add verbiage in there that gives a lot of speculation to who would pay what. If it's not cut and dry in a road maintenance agreement, you'll never get anywhere with anybody of who's going to pay. Or if they wanted 100% of the voting factor to be 100% and not a majority, you're always going to get somebody that doesn't feel like they need to pay for anything, which is going to end any kind of maintenance. Even though you have a road maintenance agreement, if it isn't spelled out completely cut and dry, everybody will speculate that I don't have to pay for that. And there was a lot of verbiage and a lot of emails traded of that style of agreement, and you just can't have that because that's not going to make good for anybody.
So, sorry, Andy. It looks like on February 8th, the Homeowners Association responded to you. And then I don't see anything follow up on that. Did we give up then?
No, I've had conversations with the homeowners since then. We're real close with the homeowners, but there's a few things, for instance, and correct me if I'm wrong, that talks about, you know, if we visibly see damage caused by others, that we won't be responsible for that. Well, what is that? Who's the referee in that, right? You just can't have that style of road agreement. They wanted, and then they started to change it into, and this all came in this last round of comments. Then they wanted to change it into an easement agreement. Well, I have no desire to use the loop in Nutwood, and I could be fine with abating any kind of rights to the loop in the county. But in order to do that, you have to go back, you have to draft documents, you have to re-record against APNs. It's my understanding that if you have a note against it, you have to get whoever's the note holder to sign off on that. I mean, that's very taxing and a problem, right? It just convolutes everything. You know, they wanted to remove the clause that there was to be no gate, or they could put a gate inside the city limits. I said, well, I'm pretty sure that the city wouldn't allow that, but after the county, you could do whatever you wanted. It's got to be an open, free road. If you take and put that out, unless you tie it directly in, you're leaving to the speculation of that agreement. So you would have to tie that into the, I guess, the so many feet, which I can't speak for the city, but I don't know how the city would be on board with that. at this point. But, there's a lot of speculation when they come back and give us comments that it's just got to be cut and dry. And that's where I'm trying to get it back to. And then in between all that, the front parcel, Mr. Archer, he didn't want to pay for the whole percentage. And then we kind of got him back on board that it wasn't going to be, he was thinking, hundreds of thousands of dollars in road maintenance. I mean, it's not that. The road's actually in pretty fair shape. There are some cracks in it and stuff like that. But for the last, I think it was built in 1998, and nobody's really done anything but I believe seal coat it twice. So it hasn't really been taken that great a care of up until now. In our original agreement, we were going to get it back to it's better than current standards after the 3 projects were built on our own dime. And so it's been, like I say, it's been a work in process. And I've been working on this a lot longer than the date in that draft says. I apologize that Mr. Madden put that in there that way, but it has been at least a year that I've been working on this diligently.
Great, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Gibson.
Thank you. I just need to get some clarity on a couple of things. So, Andy, could I ask you to stay a little closer and we'll
that's all right. I need
get through this. So I'm just trying to understand some of the players because I was a little lost in some of the conversation. I couldn't quite figure out who had what on the map. So I'm looking at what Commissioner Neal, I think, was alluding to. Who is Laura Hartman and what is her role?
Laura Hartman?
Laura Hartman.
Oh, that's I believe that's Tom's legal secretary.
Okay, that's Tom Madden's office.
Yes.
Okay. All right, and who is Cassie Hill and what are her positions?
That's president of the association.
Okay, president of the association. Okay, all right. So I have questions for staff. So, Darren, could you put up, I think it's one of the first slides, go back to the beginning. I'm looking for the language that you had put up about the city standing or legal standing in regards to being involved in an agreement. Yeah. No, there was something I think, let me see. I think I was seeing something. I'm just trying to figure out what is the city's legal standing in this agreement. My understanding is we really have none in terms of being able to negotiate, or is that correct?
Yeah, we're not a party to the maintenance agreement, but the city has imposed the condition of approval that the agreement between the property owners be executed before Andy moves forward with vertical construction, which is where we're at right now.
Okay. Again, I'm just trying to clarify everybody's role, right? So then to be clear, we're not a party to the drafting or language in the agreement. To what extent are we approving anything? Is it literally just that there is all parties signed on to a document? Is that to the extent?
So Mr. Brown prepared the draft. He's run it through a couple different reviews. When he thought it was close, he did submit it to myself just to make sure it was consistent with the condition of approval. So myself and the city engineer reviewed it and did say that we believed it was consistent and that he could move forward with getting it signed and recorded.
Okay. All right. So again, just make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, Warren, is that really our role is just to make sure an agreement is in place and all the parties are on board and we're satisfying this number 16.
Yeah, our role is to execute condition 16.
But we're not negotiating, to be clear. We are not negotiators, arbitrators. That is not our role or function.
No. We've tried to help because we believe it's in everybody's interest, but our only involvement is to make sure condition 16 is ultimately fulfilled or amended.
Yeah, I find this really to be an unfortunate situation. For clarity, I was reading through some of the language and they were referencing a gate. Where exactly would the gate be located if one was put in?
We're not familiar with the gate. The project did not include a gate.
Okay. And does the city have any authority for the gate, or would that be up to the county to decide whether a gate is being put in? Because it looks like the homeowners association is pushing for.
Yeah, the city wouldn't be in the position to allow a gate on a private road that served properties outside the city limits.
Okay. All right. And is there anybody in the room, such as the city engineer, that could give us a little bit of an idea what the approximate annual cost it would be to maintain this length of road with something like has been done in the past with basic seal coating? Or there's a contractor in the room that could probably answer that too.
David Athy, city engineer. I don't really have, current maintenance costs. They typically range the type of maintenance you do. This would be a great question for our public works department. And maybe Mr. Brown can give us an idea, but typically they range from 25 cents a square foot for like an oil, maybe 50 cents a square foot in that range, up to, heavy rehab, which is 2-inch grind and an overlay, up to $5 a square foot or more. I mean, Mr. Brown may be able to help me with those costs. I don't do capital projects, so it's a little out of my range right now, but it ranges and it can be significant depending on what kind of rehab or maintenance they need.
All right, thank you. That's the extent of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gibson. I have one line of questions. Commissioner Gibson did a good job defining the legal responsibilities of all the parties. I want to go to the practical side. If you could put up the DRC exhibit number 1, it was in red type that showed actually the lot lines. I want to make sure I have an understanding. So in the real world, things don't work perfectly, and sooner or later this road needs to be maintained, needs to be improved. If nothing happens here and there's no agreement in place, is it my understanding that, and I'll call it the party that owns the Peterbilt site, because we know that as such, is that the entity that has responsibility for the road? They own the road right now? Is that what I heard? Staff could clarify?
Yes. So the underlying owner of that Nutwood Circle parcel is the parcel on the corner, which is where the Peterbilt project is proposed.
Okay. So we have a roadway, kind of a de facto, appears to be public street, but isn't, that's serving a variety of properties, including a residential neighborhood, that really the long-term responsibility is on one party's shoulders, that owner of that property. That road will deteriorate over time. What happens when it significantly deteriorates and that party is not interested in doing anything with it? It becomes obviously potentially a private matter for parties seeking some kind of relief, legally or otherwise. I assume there's an avenue potentially in the future that should the property owners decide they want to push for that to be a public street, they could petition the city to take it. The city, I presume, would have to require it to be built to certain standards. That could be assessed back to the benefiting parcels. Would that be a correct scenario that's possible? Just wondering, long-term, if problems arise, how does that street get remedied?
The only way to guarantee or ensure that it continues to be maintained at some sort of condition close to what it is to make sure there's some sort of agreement now. If that road deteriorates, as Mr. Athy said, the cost of rehabbing a road gets very, very expensive very quickly. That's not something the city would ever be interested in taking on the cost of that. Creating assessment districts afterwards is way harder than doing a road maintenance agreement, so there's low likelihood there. If you end up with a road that just turns back into a dirt road, it's going to be a bad situation that probably just becomes an ongoing kind of civil matter between all the parties.
Okay. And then I'm just curious, why, when there was a hotel proposal here, was that potentially going to become a city street? And now with all of this development that's happening, that's not a scenario that's being considered?
Staff really doesn't have a lot of information about the history of this annexation or what, agreements may have been implied or not, but it wasn't accepted as a city street, so it isn't a city street today.
Okay, thank you. I think a couple of commissioners have given me signs they have subsequent questions. Commissioner Jorgensen? All right, and Commissioner Christensen?
I did have a follow-up question, and it may have been answered before, but I'm just trying to get kind of a piggyback on what you're talking about there. Is it, since this is a private property / private road, is it something that the city has normally done or done often to dictate certain terms for construction or permitting based upon having to have an agreement per se for maintenance of a road or access? what I'm trying to, I guess I'm trying to clarify. I don't want to say is this something that happens often, because we know it doesn't happen too often. We know that there's private roads like this. I'm just trying to understand why number 16 actually was put into that portion. And again, I'm just looking back on it now going, gosh, when I saw this before, I didn't even, the importance of it, I guess, didn't really hit me as much because we're now in this situation. Is that something normal for the city? In other words, if someone wanted to build something on a property there and they had their easement access to that property, would that be a normal thing that the city would say, well, you have to have some kind of road maintenance agreement before you can build something?
I think it's pretty normal for the city to require maintenance for shared facilities, whether it's landscape, access driveways, whatnot. So all our projects include those sorts of requirements today. This obviously is an older project, and for whatever reason, it wasn't a requirement. In order for, I guess, the orderly development of this area and the long-term kind of neighborhood quality, that road needs to be maintained. I think everybody agrees to that.
I would agree with that too. I guess what I'm saying though is that the road was already there. It'd be one thing if there wasn't a road there already. And I could see that makes sense that you would want something like a maintenance agreement to be forward, but to the detriment or handcuffing of someone else, where people that aren't even in the city would be able to handcuff that person, seems.
Well, the condition of approval never mentioned the homeowners association. So the intent of the condition was just the 3 commercial parcels that are undeveloped in the city limits. And I think it appears to be a reasonable condition based on the quantity of commercial development that's going to be using that road in the future. But unfortunately, the parties just haven't been able to agree.
Okay. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I had, did you have something to say? To answer my question.
If you have a brief reply, would you please go back to the microphone again? It's the only way we get you in the record.
Andy Brown, 70 Nutwood. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the 2 parcels from Coast County's Peterbilt and Mr. Ayers, those were split after they were annexed into the city. That was one parcel, I believe, before that. So if there was any point that they needed a road maintenance agreement, it should have been a condition of those 2 lot splits.
Well, yeah, if I remember correctly, they were split most recently, if I remember. Is that correct, Darren? Were they split recently?
They were not split after that project. So they were either split at the time, but there wasn't a parcel map after that project that subdivided these without some kind of development plan.
Okay, so was it the front one which one was the project on for the?
They were on both. I believe the hotel project was on both properties.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions by commission members? I'll hold off till later as well then. Okay. Hearing none, we will open the public hearing. The Planning Commission at this point in time would like to hear from anybody either in chambers or calling in with any thoughts, comments, or questions on this issue. I do have a speaker card that I'm going to pass over to Marcy.
Good evening, Commissioners. Pamela Giardini, and I actually am the agent for both the Craig Archer project, which is Peterbilt, and for Doug Ayers project, which is the mini storage facility. Just by serendipity, I happened to be here. I didn't know this was going on. So I was like, oh, I think I should talk on this. The original condition appears to say that all 3 commercial projects should go in and do the road maintenance together. We had a traffic study done on the Peterbilt site, and maybe something to consider, I don't know Mr. Brown at all, would be, to let the neighborhood know that each residential unit has 10 trips per day that goes from their residence down that street and back. And so they have a lot of wear and tear on that portion of Nutwood, so that they understand that kind of do have a responsibility to keep it up. I have not been informed by either of my clients about the situation. It does seem rather unfair to have Mr. Archer have to maintain Nutwood in its entirety because he owns it in fee title when he would not be using any part of it past his entrance off Netwood to the Peterbilt site. Most of his trucks will be coming in through the Theater Drive side. And then again, Mr. Ayers has the mini storage, so there'll be traffic going there too. I don't have a solution for you. Maybe Mr. Brown could, I think letting his grading permit go ahead and us resolving this issue so he could go horizontal, vertical, sorry about that, would be a good thing. And then we can continue talking about this, but to remove the condition totally would put the burden either on the two southern parcels or solely on Mr. Archer, and I don't think that's fair. So if there was some way you could release his grading permit and yet still have the negotiations going on, that seems like that would be the best solution, and possibly informing the residents of the amount of traffic they're going to be putting on that road on a daily basis. Maybe Mr. Brown knows the number of residences there. I don't, since I wasn't planning on speaking on this tonight, but 10 per household, you could quickly come up to a couple hundred trips a day. So it seems like they should have some responsibility to add into the road maintenance. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. I didn't discern a specific question there, so we don't have to come back and answer that. That was a statement, I believe. Are there any other comments from those in the room that they would like to voice on this particular item? Do we have anybody calling in?
There's no callers.
Okay. One last chance if anybody has questions, comments. Okay, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. I'd like, if I could, to pick up on one question that I got distracted when I was card delivering there a few minutes ago. Is there anything, if this was removed at this point in time, is there anything that would preclude the city from putting it on one or both of the parcels on the south side of this road again when those come back for development?
No, those projects are in process. Currently, staff's thinking was that all of these projects would include the same condition of approval. So we'll likely, regardless of what happens here, continue to have a condition for a road maintenance agreement on all the commercial projects as they move forward.
Very good, thank you. Okay, questions, comments, ultimately motion by the commission. Let me start at the other end, Commissioner Christensen. Get organized. Commissioner Neal.
I think my biggest concern is the fact that the condition only requires that the property owners within the city limits are included. And it sounds like they have agreement between those three property owners already. So I think my concern is removing that condition. I think we've already, other than signing it, we've decided, or the applicant has decided to include the homeowners association, which I understand, but that wasn't one of the conditions of the condition. So I'm having a hard time being able to just remove that condition. So that's it for me.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Gibson.
I find this an unfortunate position, but we are not a legal party to this. We have no legal standing. I don't believe we should be getting in the middle of trying to negotiate between the parties. I think that would open the city up for legal recourse. It's not our position. I do distinctly remember this room being filled, which it rarely is, with people that were really upset. And they were mollified by the fact that Andy was willing to enter into a road agreement. And that's why I'm suspecting, as I think you indicated, why they're not here, because they believe that that's what's going to happen. I'm not in favor of removing this. Unfortunately, I think that there's either an agreement and everybody wins, or there's not an agreement, there's going to be litigation and everybody's going to lose. That's my sense of what's going to happen. The homeowner association has legal standing, in my opinion. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm a risk manager, and I'm telling you, there's legal standing for them if that road is damaged and there's not some sort of maintenance. And every party that's being asked to be a member of this agreement has standing. So I would, as bad as this is, I don't see any solution, and I don't believe that it's up to us to do this. I do find this sort of issue, though, of, as Warren had indicated, common easements, common access. There's a whole housing development over off of Creston Road, I believe, that has non-accepted city roads, and there's maintenance agreements. So I think that's pretty standard. I don't find that to be an unusual condition, and I would not have ever approved this project as much as I'm in favor of it. Going forward, I would have never approved it without that condition of there being a maintenance agreement on that road, because ultimately, if it's not maintained, as it was alluded, it eventually turns into a dirt road, and then we are going to have litigation. So that's not the solution. I think the solution is that somebody's got to, figure out how to get to that agreement. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Covarrubias.
Thank you. Yeah, this is absolutely a tough situation, and I do feel for Andy. And in my opinion, I do believe that Andy has gone through every effort he can to resolve this. But I tend to agree a little bit, unfortunately, Andy, that if something isn't done now, this situation could get even worse. And unfortunately, I don't know what the easy solution is. Unfortunately, we're just going to have to try to get, or you're going to have to try to get all the parties on board with some type of an agreement. I think it's in the best interest, not only for now, but going in the future. So as much as I want to help Andy out, because I do like his project, I think he's done everything he can. I just think proceeding without some kind of agreement, even in its simplicity, it's going to create bigger problems down the road. So those are my comments for now.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis.
Here are my feelings. I've already said I support this project, and I'm looking at a October 5th, 2023 expiration date. I don't want a local business person to have to spend a lot more money. I would like to toss this up to the City Council with the statement that we remove condition 16 at this time. I am hopeful that the parties would come together. We have a representative from one of those parties here tonight, kind of putting a timeline. And but I know this body, we make exceptions all the time, height exceptions. We have a local business person here with a good project, and I don't want to have him held hostage by other people not showing a spirit of cooperation. So I'd like to toss it up to City Council and remove condition 16 at this time. That's where I'm coming from.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
I agree. I agree with that. I think that Mr. Brown is in a position where he's holding the bag on this, and it's a condition the city was aware of that it existed evidently at some point in history, and we don't know why or the details. The city was willing to have the road turned over to them to maintain it, and I don't feel like this is an equitable situation. I also would support recommending to the City Council that they eliminate condition 16.
Thank you. Mr. Christensen.
Thank you. I first off, I wanted to point out, I agree. I also agree with some of your Commissioner Neal's comments. We can go back in time and try and decide who and where and what and when went wrong. I think we've all done that about 10 times over in our head just tonight, and I don't think we're going to get that solution resolved. I can tell you that I agree with Commissioner Neal. I feel it's unfair that someone that's not in the city can, have such strong control over a project that's within the city. But going around that, one of the things that I think that we have to recognize is we all agree that it's in everyone's interest there to come to some agreement for a maintenance agreement. I think that that's probably been the most important thing said tonight. And I don't think that's going to happen if someone else can hold someone's project hostage, knowing that that's never going to be come to fruition because they hold the cards by saying, hey, it's our way all the way or no way. And in my viewpoint, I'm agreeing that we should move this forward to get it permitted, because I believe that if this project does move forward, even to some extent with grading permit at this point in time, I'm hoping that that is something that motivates people to come to the table and want to come to an agreement. Without that, I don't think we'll have an agreement. We'll just continue on, and and I would agree with Gibson at that point, then there's going to be litigation flying around everywhere, which I don't think any of the parties really want. So in my opinion, I would agree. I think it needs to be omitted at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I guess my view on this is that Mr. Brown is caught in a very awkward position, and we and he certainly would like to see that project move forward. Absent, in this specific case, the ability to see that condition come back again, as Mr. Frace has mentioned, on some subsequent properties that are going to develop there that maybe have a stronger interest even than Mr. Brown. I would hold the line and say I would not remove this condition, but the fact that that hangs out there as still a way in which this could be achieved, I'm willing to consider removal of the condition at this time and a recommendation as such to the City Council. Any other questions or comments by commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Neal.
And just to follow up, the thing that I'm having a real problem with is that the applicant chose to include the HOA in this agreement. It was not part of the original condition. So the original condition was requires the property owners within the city limits to be party of this agreement. I believe he has unanimity of those property owners. So from where I'm sitting, I think the agreement could go forward. Now, is that fair to the 3 commercial property owners? I don't think so, because the HOA would be benefiting greatly. But as I see it, this body shouldn't forego this condition because the group wanted to bring in an additional party to the agreement. So there's my.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gibson, and then I'll see if there's a motion.
I think the analogy would be we let the horse out of the barn, we cannot put the horse back in the barn. You can't waive number 16 and at some point think that the city can enforce 16. You let this out now, what I heard from staff is there is no enforcement that there would be a road maintenance agreement for any of that development. I think that's bad planning. I think Andy's in a bad spot, and I'd like to see this move forward, but I think the alternative is worse, and I would just about guarantee that there's going to be litigation because somebody's going to be upset that doesn't happen. You're not going to be able to put the horse back in the barn. You let that go now, there will not be a road maintenance agreement because we have nothing to enforce.
Okay. I think we've been. Yes, Commissioner Covarrubias.
Excuse me. Yes, thank you very much. And I hate to keep beating this up a little bit, but just for clarity, for my own peace of mind, just to be clear, if we vote to move this on to council to remove item 16, are we saying then we could not impose something similar on the other 2 developers that are in the adjacent that are coming to us for projects in the future?
The commission is going to have complete discretion on future projects to impose a same or similar condition or no condition. You'll have discretion either way.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. That's all.
Okay, Commissioner Davis.
I'm the one that kind of put the verbiage to remove it at this time. I think Mr. Brown has shown a spirit of cooperation. He wants to have the road maintained. I think we take it up to City Council, let his project move forward, and let this continue to get negotiated. I'm not saying remove it. I trust that Andy will work really hard, but I don't think we should hold his development hostage. I mean, I was out there. It's beautiful. He's got all the equipment there ready to go. This is a local here, and we need to support local Paso Robles businesses, and that's where I'm coming from.
Does anybody have a motion they would care to offer? We have two options on the screen, which are the two courses of action we could take this evening.
I move that we accept option 2 recommended at council. City Council approving, removing condition number 16 based on findings.
We have a motion from Commissioner Christensen for option 2, which is the removal of the finding. Is there a second? The second from Commissioner Davis. Any further discussion by the commission? I see none. Looking up and down the line. Commissioner Covarrubias, any further discussion?
No, sir.
Okay. I would ask staff to please call the question.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson?
No.
Commissioner Neal?
No.
Chairperson Kogler?
No.
Motion passes 4-3.
Okay. It goes on to council with a recommendation for removal of condition 16. All right, we will now move into our second public hearing of the evening.
Chairperson Kogler?
Yes,
I don't
Commissioner
need
Neal.
to step down for this. I have a conflict. My wife works in the office.
All right. If
Applicant.
you'd like to make yourself comfortable in the posh lobby, we will come and find you when the appropriate time comes around.
Thank you.
Okay, public hearing number 2 this evening is for the Thorndike Light Industrial Complex, map 20-0079, PD 20-16, TTM 2839. Property is located at 2709 Germain. APN is 025424 001 through 008, inclusive of all of those numbers. This item has been continued from its original introduction to us in January on the 24th. The applicant is Brian Thorndike, and with that, may we have a staff report, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, Darren Nash, City Planner. As you mentioned, this project was originally scheduled back in January. It was continued, and we do have it on the agenda tonight. We did renotice the project, so it's been renoticed for the public hearing, both in the newspaper and to neighbors. So this is a new public hearing for this project. A lot of you may recognize this project. It's been on DRC multiple times over the past few years. Mr. Thorndike is here along with Mrs. Giardini for the project. This is out on Wisteria Lane at Germain. This is a project, if you look at the detail to the right of that vicinity map, this was a project that was approved back in 2007 for a little office complex. It was postage stamp lots. The footprints of the buildings were the lots, and then the common area was the parking lot and parking spaces. There wasn't a lot out in this area, in Wisteria area at that time. So this was an office complex that was proposed at the time. It was approved, but it established 8 separate parcels on this corner lot, and passed the Planning Commission approval, development plan, and the map that got recorded here. No development ever occurred. So when this subdivision went through track 2269, the streets were put in, the curb gutters and sidewalks, the utilities were stubbed out. So this is a ready to build on lot. This project never went forward. And again, this is showing the project that was proposed and approved by the Planning Commission back in 2007. So for the Planning Commission's review tonight, we're looking at adopting a new tentative tract map that would reduce the number of lots from 8 to 6. We're looking for a development plan for parcel 1. Mr. Thorndike has a building design that is included in the review tonight that he would like to get approved so that he can move forward with the building of a building on parcel 1. The intent is to approve the development plan over all 6 lots, kind of a master development plan. There's some design guidelines that the applicant has provided to help guide the development of the other 5 lots in the future as they are sold and as developers propose plans for those lots. So the designs here, the site planning is showing a conceptual building footprint for the lots that could work. The way that this development is set up, the conditions of approval would be that those lots 2 through 6 would come back, go through a site plan review at the DRC level where the specific placement, parking, use, all of that would be determined at that time. But they would be limited to what they could do on the size based on that property. And we can talk about that a little more as when we get to the site plan. The driveway would be a common driveway access between the properties. There is a condition regarding a maintenance agreement that would happen with the subdivision prior to recording the map. There's a note there in blue. One of the things we want to clarify is the plans. There was a standard condition from the fire department that marked 26-foot wide drive aisle. I was able to determine with them that they actually only require 20 feet wide for their emergency purposes. The zoning code for a two-way driveway would require 24 feet. So we're going to, with the clarification of the approvals tonight or where the Planning Commission decides to go with it, would be the request to go from the 26 feet wide to 24. And then the tract improvements would include the frontage, landscaping, driveway approaches, parkway landscaping, along with the utilities. So this is the layout being proposed by Mr. Thorndike. This would show the 6 lots. It would show a common driveway. This is the 24-foot wide driveway that I mentioned that would curve around and come back out to Wisteria. This is parcel 1. And this is the one Mr. Thorndike would like to develop out with the plans provided this evening. These other properties would come back through site plan review. This model of, site planning, architectural type would kind of set the tone for what's being looked at here. The gray areas are conceptual footprints with parking coming in off the alley. There's been questions as this project has gone forward through DRC about, how these properties could change, how the site plans could change for the parcel. It is possible that things could change on each of these lots that would be handled through the site plan review. But we know that we have a business park, we have a planned industrial type zoning that allows certain types uses. What's shown here is more of a standard light industrial type use, light industrial warehouse type use. If there was a situation where we got, let's say, maybe a little delicatessen or some kind of a eating or coffee establishment, that is something that is permitted in the zone. That is something that is encouraged to provide those types of accessory uses to these users in the area, these employees that they could walk to and get those types of things. So we do encourage that. If that were the case, more parking may need to be required on some of these properties. That may mean that this footprint may need to get smaller in order to accommodate parking. Those are the details that would need to be ironed out as each of the site plan reviews come forward. We do know, though, that we wouldn't want a situation where we would have the building set back and parking in front. We want the buildings in front, the parking in the rear, and that's established in the design guidelines. So the development plan, the master development plan, this is showing the setbacks along 15-foot setbacks along the roads. It's showing that the setback area will be landscaped. The setback areas, some of these areas are proposed to be some detention basins. We do have a landscape plan that shows how these areas would be landscaped. With the, prior to recording the map to create the 6 lots, the improvements that would be completed would be completing this driveway, this interior driveway through and out. It would be establishing the perimeter landscaping and detention for the subdivision. And it would also, there would be some utilities that would come down the road and then stubbed out for these lots. That would be the phase 1, the requirements for recording the map. And then Mr. Thorndike is wanting to build this building here. These other establishments, these other lots would come in as they're sold and folks wanted to propose to build on them. So that's, those would come in as needed, but driveways, utilities would be established. This is the site plan for that corner lot, Mr. Thorndike's parcel 1. He's proposing, we have about a 6,000 square foot building. It could be 3 tenant spaces. It could be 1 tenant space. The parking that's shown is more of a light industrial warehouse type user to accommodate this parking. The building is oriented towards the corner, parking off of the driveway. He's showing some drives back to get to this kind of central area that could access some roll doors to these buildings. This area in here is showing an accessory storage area. This would be back behind a 6-foot decorative type fence here and at a minimum of 15 feet of landscaping in front of it. This is the design being proposed for that lot 1. Metal construction, shed type roofs, windows up high, some corten steel, roll doors, glass is what's being proposed for that initial building. Here's some other views of the other sides. Floor plan showing, floor plan showing other areas could be divided up into tenant spaces or multiple or less users, more square footage. Jim Burrows, landscape architect, provided the landscape plan. This is showing the landscaping along the street frontages. One thing I didn't mention on that phase 1 would also be landscaping this edge here along the drive. The individual properties would then have more specific landscaping for their sites when they came through their site plan review. Another thing to mention is this project has existing curb, gutter, and sidewalk. There's a parkway situation. The phase 1 subdivision improvements would include landscaping those parkways with the project as well. Fencing plan. This is the detail of the proposed fencing. This would be, we've got an orange border here, looking at kind of the orange area here, this possible storage area here. and then back at the ends of these areas. Basically, anywhere, the conditions of approval talk about storage areas not being in between the building and the street. So not to, for instance, we wouldn't have a situation where the storage would be a primary use. That's not a permitted use in this zone. The primary use is permitted. Accessory to that could be some storage. Some of the users may not have storage. If there's a situation where we have the accessory storage and it's visible, this is the proposed view obscuring fence being proposed. If you recall, the Planning Commission reviewed the Beta project back here at the end of the cul-de-sac. That was a project for a new facility for Beta Motorcycles USA, approved here. They talked about a fence along here. This was approved for a chain link and slat type fence up until a certain point. I believe it was like 60 feet or so, and then there would be a decorative type fence just so that along the public right-of-way, the street, that more decorative style fence was used here. Condition that we've placed on this development plan was that Mr. Thorndike's project worked with the Beta project, and they come up with a consistent fence here so that we don't have two fences next to each other. And so that's coordinated there. And that's a condition there that we will take a look at with the Beta project, which is actually, I believe we have grading plans. They're going through the engineering department. And I'm not sure if we have construction drawings going through building, but that project is underway. This blue fence here is chain link and it's existing. So this fence was put in with this project here to the west. So really isn't a lot of fencing with this initial master development plan, just working here with Beta. And then this would be a fence used throughout to help screen accessory yard areas. The applicants have provided some design guidelines that are included in the project. They would establish, they would talk about the fencing types, the lighting types, the landscape plans part of that, trash enclosure locations, just some general design guidelines for working on designs for these lots. So what we're looking at today is option one, approving the development plan and the tentative map, subject to conditions of approval. I did mention the change in the width of the driveway, but I'll be more specific here. And then there's a couple dates that went from the January to the February, but changes I'd be requesting with any motion would be page 95. Condition 2, if we change the expiration date from January 10th, 2025 to February 14th, 2025. Then page 98, the same, change it from January 10th to February 14th. And then on page 105 is the standard checkbox conditions. At the top of 105, we omit that truck access requirement and the 26-foot width. We would go back to page 104 and check the access road at least 20 feet. That's a fire department condition. And then we'll be specific that the drive aisle, I'll find a condition of approval in the development plan that makes sense to show the zoning code requirement for 24 feet. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Darren. Commissioners have any questions before we see if Mr. Thorndike would like to add some additional information? Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, Darren, was it a change in width or width requirement of the driveway?
Pardon me?
Was it a change in width of the actual driveway or the What was the change there again from something to
From
20?
26 feet to 24.
Okay, and does that in any way affect the turning radius that we talked about at DRC in the circulation?
No, so the 24 feet still has the radiuses and things for the delivery trucks.
Okay, that was one thing I was wondering. Can I go ahead and ask some others? Or you want to start at this end, or what's your?
You can if you think we'd have benefit of hearing from the applicant first and then
Yeah,
posing those
that's a good
questions. I
idea.
would
Thank you.
suggest. Okay, let's do that if we may. If there are no other burning questions immediately, we'll come back to that in a minute. I would ask if Mr. Thorndike or any representatives have comments for the commission this evening before we launch into questions.
Good evening, Commissioners. Pamela Giardini with Planning Solutions, and I'm the agent for Mr. Thorndike. And with the corrections that Darren made regarding the changes in the date and the road width was always shown as 24 feet. We did run the turning radiuses on that. It just, when it was coming before Planning Commission in January, I noticed that the wrong road width was in there. Darren checked with the fire department and 24 feet was okay, so we're good with that. I'm basically here to answer any questions you have tonight. You've seen it at DRC. We made the modifications and changes and brought you the additional information you wanted. So if you have more questions, I'm here, and so is Mr. Thorndike.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, we'll go back to see if the commissioners have questions. I think I'll follow the same path as before, and I'll get to Commissioner Davis in a moment. Let me start with Commissioner Covarrubias.
I appreciate that. I had a quick question, probably for Dave. On page 68, under facts, item number 2, it stipulates into the city engineer has reviewed the revised plans and can accept the plans with some required modifications that will be finalized at the time of issuance of grading permit. I mean, what type of modifications are we talking about? Do we have an idea?
Commissioner Covarrubias, give me a second. I need to look at this item. Did you say it was page 68?
It's page 68 in my binder information here. It's under facts. Excuse me 1 second, I'm gonna mute you.
Yes, thank you. I apologize for that delay. Commissioner, so we've been working closely with the applicant on the design of their stormwater system, and they don't have it fully designed yet. However, it appears from the information their engineer has submitted that it'll work in terms of mitigating stormwater from the site. So that final design, when it comes in, I believe that fact has been put in there just to recognize that there'll be some additional approval when the grading and plans come into the city.
Okay, so but based on what you've seen and been told, you don't anticipate that there's going to be any significant modifications. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I believe that's true. I think what's shown on the screen isn't entirely the current plan, but the applicant's engineer has worked really hard to make it work with the 10-foot public utility easement across the front of the site.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Hey, Darren, you mentioned all the landscaping around the utilities, the driveway, all of that's going to be done on the initial phase. And I apologize if I missed this. Did you say that also includes curbs and gutters?
The curbs, gutters, sidewalks are already there. Those were put in initially with the subdivision prior to the recording of the lots.
Got it. Okay. All right. No other questions right now, but I may have a couple more here in just a minute.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Davis.
I'm familiar with this project. I like it a lot. I was on DRC in November, and so I don't really have any questions about Mr. Thorndike's. I do have a question, Darren, maybe you can help me about as the overall development occurs. Will they be following the architectural style of Mr. Thorndike's building? I mean, is that, or will it come in independently? That's what I'm kind of questioning.
Sure. I think the design guidelines that are part of this show, some different type buildings, some gable roof components, materials are similar, but the intent is not that every lot look exactly like Mr. Thorndike's. I think if we think about some of the smaller industrial buildings that were done on Combine Street that came through a DRC review. If you recall, the Combine project had when it was originally subdivided, had a pretty strict architectural scheme that just did not work. And we came back, amended that at Planning Commission to give a little more flexibility, similar to what we're proposing here. But that, I think the main components of that master development plan is orienting those buildings along the street in the front with any type of storage requirements being on the side, screened, set back, or behind is kind of what that master development plan is anticipating. And then we'll get into more specific, metal windows, more of that industrial type style architecture is what's anticipated.
Okay, and then just one more follow-up. So on the landscaping, will we expect kind of the same thing, same kinds of plants? I mean, as robust as Mr. Thorndike's landscaping? It will happen piecemeal or phase, correct?
So phase one, the intent as shown up on the screen is that those edges, the setback areas, the landscaping would be done in the phase one.
Okay.
And then each individual site will have some landscaping, but it's going to be pretty minimal and not a lot to be seen from the public right away. But yes, the intent would be there's a plant palette in the design guidelines. The intent would be that it would correspond as each of those lots develop.
And DRC would see that as it comes forward.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jorgensen.
Thank you. I have some questions, Darren, on the page 124, the site design requirements in the design guidelines. The first item says buildings are to provide an entrance from the interior access road to create a cohesive single development appearance. And then later on, it says there shall be an entrance from the frontage streets as well. But on the sample for phase one, I don't understand where the entrance on, how is there a presence on the interior street? I'm not seeing.
Did you say on parcel one?
Yes, on the one that you have on the screen.
So there isn't any proposed entry to the site on the corner. It would come in off the common driveway, then come down. I think pedestrian-wise, there's an entrance, or if this was a separate entrance, they could have a walkway up. But in terms of vehicular, it would be off the common drive with the parking in the rear.
Okay, that's not really my question. It says buildings are to provide an entrance from the interior access road to create a cohesive single development appearance. So
I think the intent is that.
I don't mean the one on the corner, there's kind of symbolic. I mean, from, as this is saying, from the interior access road, I don't see how that works. Where's the front of the building from the interior?
The intent is the front of the buildings would be facing to the street, except for these two parcels would be oriented, to the interior drive. That is something that was provided by the applicant. We could have them explain more what their intent was, but my intent of the conditions of approval and the site plan review was to ensure that these buildings would be oriented to the street and not have parking in between the street and the building, be accessed off the common drive. As you come in this drive, there's going to be parking along the sides, I would think. So my thought would be if that particular detail could be stricken, because I understand what you're saying, trying to create a cohesive project internally off the drive. This is more of a service drive coming in with parking, orienting roll doors, entrances. So I think the intent is the look along the streets, not as much as interior to the driveway.
Okay, I don't have a problem with what you just said. It seems reasonable, but that's not what this says.
Okay. Well,
So-
the planning commission has the ability to strike out what may not make sense.
Okay, it just didn't make sense to me. Okay, and then on the same site design requirements, number 5, it says that the fence can be 4 feet high to a maximum of 6. I have concern about, well, 4 feet, I have a lot of concern, but just a general statement, and I understand that this isn't the ultimate site design. We don't know what that is exactly yet. But when you were showing the fence, the colored blue, I believe, fence diagram, Darren, or red, sorry. So there's fencing on this potential concept right along Wisteria, and it's only 6 feet high, and it's a very attractive fence, but 6 feet isn't very high for storage. So I'm concerned about there being storage directly on Wisteria at all. To me, a 6-foot fence, even an attractive fence, isn't adequate for that frontage. I mean, Wisteria is a pretty impressive industrial street.
It's possible the zoning code would allow up to 8 for situations for screening and commercial. So it's possible to go to 8. The planning commission could request that there be no storage in that area. The planning commission could request additional setback, landscape setback in those areas. I think that situation in between these two buildings is really that only situation on the side. It's possible that the buildings could be oriented to come to the property line and then have the storage behind the building. That's all possible to do. That's something we could provide some language and if that's what the planning commission would like to do.
Okay, thank you. And then the parking that's shown, as I understand it, we don't know how much parking will be required. Depends on the uses. So is the parking as shown then just showing it maxed out what is potential? Is that the purpose here?
It's my understanding, and I'll have Ms. Giardini confirm, that this project is designed at a parking ratio of 1 to 500, which is the standard kind of light industrial type. It's possible to have less parking required if you get into warehousing, because warehousing is more like 1 per 1,000. So there could be a mix of light industrial and warehouse space, which is typically what we would see in this type of development. So each property will have to comply with the parking ordinance. So if they have a less restrictive parking use, that's fine. If they require more parking based on the use, such as my example of a deli, then more than likely the building would get smaller and more parking would need to be provided. But that's something that they're limited to the size of the lots they're proposing, but we would establish that through each site plan review.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Christensen. So Darren, just kind of on top of that, just kind of clarifying, because I think you've said it so many ways, and basically the map that we're looking at is proposed layout. We just know that there's individual lots other than lot 1, which is the developed building. Obviously there's standards for the remainder of the lots, but lot 1 is the building we're approving. The other lots are on this diagram is just conceptual. It could be redesigned a different way as long as it met the standards. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's just for clarification for me. And then since we're looking at this fence plan, you told me this before, I think on DRC, I just can't remember. The very top there between inside from the chain link slats, what is that gray area there? What is that?
This is shown as accessory outdoor storage area for these lots.
Okay, all right. That's what I thought, I just couldn't remember. Okay, and then a question in regards to the parking. I know the city prefers, according to what you were saying earlier, on building 3, for example, we show parking coming towards the front of the building in that design.
Here?
Yeah. And I guess it's just a general question. Is there a preference over, whereas on lot 1 and 2, where you have the loading bays towards the street front, the city doesn't have any particular requirement on that, right? In other words, is there a preference between parking or loading bays in any way?
So right here is if it was a loading bay as opposed to parking?
Yeah, so if I'm just saying, because flip-flopping, like if you went to building 1, they have the loading bay towards the street and the parking more interior. And on building 3, they have the parking at the street. And
so there's no, on the frontages of the buildings, there's no loading bays. I think if you're referring to number 1 here and the ability to come back in here to the loading bay, that is what's being proposed. I think the question, this is shown to be more of a storage area, which I think has been a question of whether that seems reasonable or not.
Yeah.
But here, I think we would want to make sure it was screened with parking. If this was a roll door going in here, I don't think that would be an issue. We'd still have some screening. I think it gets into more specifically where storage areas might be.
Okay, and the beginning part of your answer kind of came to my next question, and just for clarification, my understanding was that on lot 1, the base area, if you go to, what page this is, if you're looking at the base area, so the trucks would back into an alcove kind of area, like in other words, you wouldn't see the area there where the trucks will be backing into for the loading bays. Is that correct?
That's correct. This would be, what they're showing is there would be a 6-foot fence with a 15-foot landscape setback in front of it along the road. This is showing a design where access could come back for deliveries into this area where there's a roll door kind of an area where trucks would come in, do kind of a 3-turn and come back. I think the intent is these would be more local type uses, more of a small kind of van type truck, not large trucks is the intent. Could this design seem to be done more efficiently with doors directly out? I think so, but this is kind of what the applicant's thinking.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. And I thank you for explaining it, because when you look at it from the overview, it's hard to see that loading bay area. But my concern too was the size of trucks pulling in and then backing all the way into that area. It looks to me like with the base area, maybe there's enough turnaround space there. I don't know. Okay, thanks for explaining that, Darren. The only other question I had for you was just clarification. You had it at, it was written up as 26 foot for the entrance, right? Fire department requires 20 and zoning code requires 24.
Correct. So if you look at page 105, and the fire department has some standard conditions, and they have a box checked. There's an option for a 20-foot width, and there's an option for a 26 width.
Okay.
Inadvertently, the checkbox for 26 was marked.
Gotcha. Okay.
I confirmed with the fire department that they were fine with 20 for their purposes. For a two-way driveway, the zoning code and the parking ordinance requires 24.
Okay.
So that's where the 24s come from.
Thank you. I was trying to write as fast as you were talking last time. I wasn't able to do it. All right. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Christensen. Mr. Gibson.
Thank you. So I'm just going to start by saying that I approve the concept of this overall project, but I'm getting stuck down and trying to understand some of the details, and I'm finding that there's some inconsistent statements that I'm trying to work my way through, so bear with me. So David, could I ask you a question? Just on the same page 68. Item number 2. I don't know that we, actually, I was on DRC at least one time when this came before us, and I'm not sure I actually ever knew why this was postponed, not once but twice, but I'm guessing that this is the explanation. But this says that the issue was that there were stormwater detention basins that were shown within a public utility easement. And then number 2 says that the updated civil plans you've seen so far have been redesigned, so only a portion of them are still within the easement. Is that correct?
Yeah, so when this subdivision was originally designed, it appears to me that they just combined the PUE with the 15-foot landscape setback. So everything within this subdivision has a 15-foot PUE. That's great. It's wider than what's really needed for an industrial type subdivision, commercial type subdivision. Usually that's 10 foot. So in working with the applicant, we've reduced the public utility easement down to 10 feet. I caught that late, but they were good sports about it. We sat down and negotiated it, came to a conclusion, worked with their engineer, and worked out a compromise with the 10-foot PUE, which is from a public utility standpoint is wide enough. The dry utilities, electrical, gas, those kind of things need to go in that PUE.
All right, and where would we find that the easement is now 10 feet? Is that part of some agreement, or where?
So in the conditions of approval, I don't know exactly the number under engineering. There's a condition in there that to provide a 10-foot PUE. So when the final map comes in for the track map, they'll show a 10-foot PUE, the 15-foot landscaping setback, plus some other existing easements that are on the property.
All right. So on page 93, which is one of the exhibit, and then on page 97, it says that nothing is within the easement. Or are we saying that it's within the easement, but it's not an issue? Because it clearly states in the exhibit that it's not in the easement. So I'm trying to understand, reconcile it is in the easement or it's not in the easement. Or the other possibility I came up with, it's in the easement, but it's not an issue.
Right now, without the map, it's in the easement. So they're going to use the last 5 feet. So it'll be 10 feet from the right-of-way on the property side. So the front property line, and you go another 10 feet. That would be the public utility easement.
All right. So then...
And then their stormwater basin could start at that point, at that 10 feet.
All right. So on page 93, number F, it says this does not conflict with easements. And page 97, it says pretty much the same thing. Stormwater basins shall be installed on site and not overlying the public utility easement, but you're saying that they actually do. So I'm figuring that I'm just trying to look for some direction and clarity. I mean, do we need to amend these or?
Yeah, I apologize. I think there's a typo in the staff report. So right now the project is conditioned to provide a 10-foot public utility easement.
All right.
They have a 15-foot landscape setback. So they have 5 feet between the PUE and the landscape setback that they can use for stormwater and whatever method they want. And that's how the project is conditioned. And that's how the engineer has set up their stormwater system to operate.
All right.
So I apologize for that typo.
No, I'm just trying to get clarity on which way is it, so it sounds like if I understand this, then we need to change this language.
Absolutely. I think that the finding F, we can make changes to be consistent with that condition.
97 as well.
93 F, and then
it says timing prior to final tract improvements. Proposed stormwater basin shall be installed on site and not overlying public utility easement.
Number 4.
Yes.
We can definitely make sure that those are consistent.
All right. Okay. All right. Thanks. Okay. So I have a question similar, I think, maybe to what I was hearing. I'll launch on my own. I'm not quite sure what we're being asked to approve. I understand the concept of redesigning and reconfiguring this project, and I'm all in favor of that. But I really start losing clarity on what this 6,900 square foot building is going to be. On page 88, we're given examples of specific uses, but then my understanding is we're being asked to approve the building. So, Darren, can you give me some clarity on what exactly is the specific uses of this building?
The uses would be uses that are permitted in the zone and abide by the parking ordinance and any other development standards of the zoning code.
So the follow-up question, which I think one of my fellow commissioners was asking, then how do we make a decision tonight on whether the parking for this 6,900 square foot building is adequate if we don't know what the specific uses are?
This particular one is being shown as light industrial with some storage. So based on the square footage, the number of parking spaces work with what's being proposed for parcel 1.
Okay. So reconcile that again with the bottom of page 88 of the examples where there's actually going to be like delis or wine tasting or whatever with higher need for parking. What are we being asked to approve?
When they come in for their building plans that get more specific on the type of building, type of permits they're asking for, their parking will need to comply with that.
Okay.
If they, and it's pretty common, and we see it out at, Combine and things, is buildings are built as a shell building with parking where they are looked at as part of the process, make sure the parking complies. And then if users come in that are a higher parking requirement, then it's possible that their business licenses may not get approved, or their tenant improvement plan. So they're showing you a footprint and a proposed parking. So it could be limiting depending on the type of use, but they're anticipating that the parking being light industrial and some accessory storage is what the market's going to be for out here.
All right. So my understanding of what you're saying is that, so tonight we're being asked to approve a 6,900 square foot building. And at some point in the time when they actually get a business license, is that what the time when they have to determine whether the parking is sufficient or not?
At the time they get a building permit.
At the time they get a building permit.
Right. We're going to need to make sure that when they come to pull a permit to build it, that it's parked correctly.
Okay. All right. Okay, moving on. I'm a little confused on the design, and my concern is that, I need some clarity. I'd like to have some clarity on what the actual design is. My understanding is that whatever Mr. Thorndike decides, or whatever we approve, that we're setting some sort of design standards. So I'm referencing page 107, which is the plans for the proposed 6,900 square foot building. Then on page 123, I'm looking at a proposed design. Those, for me, and I'm not an architect, but those two look like completely different architectural styles. So when the DRC is asked for any of these other lots, what is the style of the building that we're going to be able to give an applicant to follow? Which of these styles?
The development plan for parcel 1 is more refined, more specific to what's being proposed on parcel 1. Parcel 2, the other parcels are anticipated that they will be different owners and have different thoughts in mind on what it is they want to develop. The applicant has provided some design guidelines to help guide through and have some consistency among the lots, but the intent is that they not all look like what's being shown for parcel 1. Part of going through the site plan review process, going through DRC and having them propose something, looking at the guidelines, there's going to be some review by the DRC that's going to then take a look at what's being proposed. If we got a situation where someone proposed a stucco building with some tile, Spanish tile, that's not really in theme with either parcel 1 or the design guidelines that are attached as well. If it comes in and it's just a plain metal building with a roll door and that's about it, I'm not going to comply because we're looking for windows, we're looking for material changes, and I think that there's enough here with what's being shown on parcel 1 and with the guidelines for also being proposed that the DRC will then have the ability to take a look and hopefully get some different types of buildings here so they don't all look the same.
All right.
And I think that's the intent. But we don't have the designs before you for all of these lots 2 through 6.
All right. So I'm hearing that the answer to the question would be, it's basically going to be a steel sort of building, and an applicant down the road could use either page 123 or 107, but that would give them an idea of the type of building that would be designed.
That's correct. Because the option would be is that we require all these lots to come back to the Planning Commission.
Right. Okay. Last thing, I'm just going to make a comment that I guess I comment in support of the design or site requirements. I have a concern about storage being on in front of anything facing Wisteria or Germain. And I don't really think that the answer is having even a higher wall. I mean, I don't think you can put hardly anything behind a 4-foot wall, 6 feet wall along a road. I'm starting to not feel comfortable with, and having an 8-foot wall is not acceptable because that really is, I don't know how to characterize that. It's just not something I would ever think would be a good idea. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Like other commissioners, I'll have some comments on architecture, but I'll reserve those for the comments section of our discussion. I do have a couple of quick questions. That graphic will serve a purpose, I think, for discussion. If, Darren, it's found that the uses in this first building require the roughly 15 or 16 spaces that are shown there in the gray, darker gray screened back area, how does that, let me ask you, what will be built? You mentioned the driveway, the parking that butts the driveway. Then as we turn and we come down towards Wisteria, there's a bay there with, looks like a half of a drive aisle. Will that half be constructed or will more be constructed? Because those aren't really accessible if half is built.
You're talking about this area here?
Yes, exactly.
And the question is, built with phase 1 or built with the building?
The question is, you've got, if what's shown in gray is built with phase 1 building or the first building on the lot, it's not a usable parking situation because there's not enough drive aisle to maneuver in.
The plans would need to show the correct dimensions of parking spaces as well as the appropriate backup. So what this is showing is the possibility of sharing some area with this property here. But as this comes in, it would need to stand alone. The parking, the backup would need to comply with the appropriate dimensions. And that's something that we would take a look at with the building plans.
Okay, so if it was deemed at that time that there was more aisle needed to access those spaces, that would be required as part of the first building. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And if it was a situation where they couldn't go across the property line, which could be, then the building would need to be altered to give the appropriate backup.
Okay.
I think when they come in for this building, more than likely, the parking is going to be along this manner. It just doesn't make sense to make it curve around and come down. But we'll see what they come in with their design.
Yeah, that's dependent on the user, the type, the occupancy, and so forth. So,
correct.
Okay. Still referring to that graphic, and it's unfortunate these graphics don't carry forward with the actual footprint for the first lot building because we know what that's proposed to be rather than the generic kind of rectangle that's there, but I'll use that. Looking at that rectangle, in kind of the access bay area, there's a white square there. Is that paved? Is that
This
bituminous
here?
paved? Right there, yes. What's the material there? I assume it's part of the access coming back into the truck doors?
So we're talking about this area here
Yes, correct,
and this area here.
correct. There's not a key seemingly that I could see to the paving in those areas.
Right, and I think the intent would be is that there would be a paved area that would come in and then access this paved area. And then this area would be storage area, but that might be a better question to clarify with the applicant.
Okay, and we can do that in a second. On the adjacent lot, on the fence plan again that was up there a moment ago, there again is a screened back pattern. If you can, there you go. Looks like it's, go back one. You had it there a moment ago. That works. So the area that looks to me like a typical concrete kind of pattern on a plan, the gray area that's on lot 3, what is that material? That's a storage area, but what is that material going to be? And I'm only asking because it's adjacent to lot 1.
Yeah, I think the intent is those storage areas would be a kind of a base area, but you can clarify with the applicant.
Okay, well, and or the next one that comes in.
Right.
Okay, and well, I'll come back to again in comments later on. I think that's all I had that purely were questions at the moment. Any other questions that have arisen from Commissioner Covarrubias or anybody seated at the table before we open the public hearing?
Chairperson Kogler, this is Commissioner Covarrubias. Can I ask another question?
Absolutely, go right ahead.
Thank you, Darren. Just so I'm clear, there's a discussion about the proposed possible building for this parcel 1, or for lot 1, I guess. Does the applicant have a tenant in mind? I'm assuming this is being constructed to lease or rent. Is there an applicant in mind or use already in mind?
It's my understanding that that there isn't, that they're building it to lease, but the applicants are here, and that'd be a good question to ask them.
Okay, I would like that question answered, please.
Okay, Commissioner Gibson, any other questions?
I actually have two. You jogged my brain to think a little more. So following up on Chairperson Kogler's question on lot 1 and then lot 3, I guess. Yeah, lot 3. It would seem that it's a common access to come down. I'm not sure how anybody would park on the west side without at least the median paving of lot 3 being put in. Does that look correct? I mean, in other words, lot 3 is going to have to be at least somewhat improved to provide access to lot 1.
And if the intent is that this be shared coming down, then they would need some kind of a reciprocal access here. And the condition of approval is that there is reciprocal parking and access.
Right.
And definitely along here, but it would need to come down and incorporate that area as well.
All right. So I had a question I forgot to ask at the beginning. I drove out again just to refresh myself of this lot. The building that's to the west, and where it came in, I was looking for the fencing. So the fencing that runs to the north of the building to the left is aligned exactly on at the edge of the building. In other words, it goes from the edge of the building and runs to the north. And the applicant is suggesting to utilize that fencing. So it occurred to me, is that building a zero lot line building, or how far offset is it actually from the property line? Do we have any idea?
There's a building along here. It's very close. I believe it's close to being on the property line.
Pretty much.
That's what this gap here is shown, and that's where this area is landscaped. And then this fencing picks up at the corner of that building and goes up, because this is a parking area on the other side.
So, because the thought occurred to me that I was just kind of curious where the property line actually was from the building to the west, is that some of this that was being in essence, included in this project actually belong to the property on the western side?
No, I think what's being shown is that the property line is at the building. This project is
So it's pretty much
on its side.
zero lot
Correct.
line. Okay, that answers the question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this project is not showing doing work off-site.
Thank you.
Okay, we may have some subsequent questions as a group for various parties, but I think at this point in time, it would behoove us to open the public hearing and see if there's public comments on this development proposal. Or is there anybody in the room who would like to speak to this? And if so, please approach the podium and provide your name and address. Don't see any at the moment, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Do we have anybody calling in, Marcy?
No callers.
Okay. And in the room again, anybody else? Yes. Ms. Giardini, are you approaching? You are.
Hi, Pamela Giardini with Planning Solutions, again, the agent for Mr. Thorndike. So some of the questions seem to have gotten answered in the discussion, but I'll try to review them, what we caught that needs to be answered. Starting with Commissioner Kogler's question, the storage area on Exhibit 2, attachment to Exhibit M shows the storage area as decomposed granite, says DG, and then the interior as AC, asphalt concrete. So that's what it's shown there as. That's important to know for stormwater drainage because of how much impervious surface you're going to be putting on the ground there. For the storage areas, we have, I think somehow it got overlooked on, I have it flagged here. There is, let's see, on page, it says 88 of my staff report, you can see the allowed uses I went through and what their square footage of parking was. And so your assumption is correct in that as each building comes in, and as Darren has explained, they will be talking about their use that will be going on inside the building. That will determine the number of parking spaces needed, and that if there are more parking spaces needed than what's shown on this preliminary plan, then they will lose some footprint of the building. And so we showed different, or I showed different scenarios, having a combination of a restaurant, a deli, and you can see on the last one that if we had a restaurant, which requires quite a bit of parking, then you would need a total of 21 spaces if that was combined with offices and wine storage. So it just depends on the different uses inside of what the need for the parking would be. DRC would be reviewing that. The other really important thing is we have architectural guidelines and site design guidelines, and I have to go, I had them flagged. So that you could see what was being required to be consistent. On page 122 of the staff report are the actual architectural style requirements, and you can see what we're requiring on each building to be consistent. So there's consistency throughout this development that not all the buildings are going to look exactly alike, but they'll have some consistent architectural features so that it has a uniform type of appearance, sort of the same kind of approach to the architecture. So you don't have one mission style building and then one super modern building and then one farmhouse, that they're all going to look about the same. So there's your architectural guidelines. And then on the site design standards, on number 4, I think it's important to point out that for the storage areas that are fronting either Wisteria or Germain, that there be tiered landscaping, so not just straight landscaping, but that you would have tiered landscaping, so it goes from your ground cover to your taller shrubs to your trees, so that it's really fully landscaped right in front of those areas, plus your 6-foot-high fence. Don't forget the fence is going to run into your building. It's going to be on the same plane there, and that if you require higher fences, then it's going to look like, you know, all wall. And so it'd be nice to have some landscaping. The lower fencing at 6 foot is still pretty high, and it's a very nice looking fence. The other thing I wanted to point out that that lots 4 and, I believe it was lots 4 and 5, will be having a interior access from the road because they don't have exterior access from Wisteria and Germain. So they will be having interior access from the interior road, as Darren explained to you. I think I've covered all your questions. If I forgot something, and that each one of these buildings, as they get developed out, will come back before DRC to make sure everything meets the ordinance and meets our guidelines that we've set out. Did I overlook any questions?
I don't believe you did. If we did, I'm sure we can point that out a little later in the discussion.
And I can come back up again. And I want to thank Dave Affey. He did meet with us quite often to figure out the stormwater situation at the last minute, so that it all was done quite nicely. And it was really nice of staff to help us through that.
Thank you. Is there any other comments? This public hearing is still open. Yes. I think we've seen you before tonight.
Yes, sir. Andy Brown, 2355 Ashwood Place. I just want to say that before tonight, I didn't know anything about this. And I've done a lot of research on this over uses and properties and stuff like this. And I think a few of the commissioners tonight would agree. This is something Paso Robles really needs. This doesn't exist right now. If you wanted to rent a space to put in just about anything and you wanted 3,000 square feet, 1,500 square feet, Paso is really hurting for something like this. I look time and time again to rent another space, and it just really doesn't exist. The zoning, we've used up a lot of our commercial space, our commercial industrial, and in a whole, I mean, this fits a T of a niche, something that I believe will be very successful for Paso Robles. We have standards for all the landscaping, the setback and everything, and that I believe would all come up at the time of submittal on a building permit and would be reviewed then. So my recommendation to staff would be to approve this project. That I think the city of Paso Robles needs more projects like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any other comments, questions? Any callers? Okay, at this point in time, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for discussion and eventual action. Let's go Mr. Christensen's end for planning commissioner. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I would fully agree with Mr. Brown's comments. I've been saying that for years, and I like to see these kinds of projects. The building looks great. I love the design plan. I really like that, the way they've designed it. It gets a little confusing because, in my opinion, the way it was submitted with the other lots and the proposed what could be's, can be's, but I understand where they're going with it. They need to help get a justification of getting the 6 lots there with the shared drive spaces. For future build out, it makes sense that they're going to have to maybe make a few little adjustments here and there when it comes to DRC. For example, on lot 1, in my opinion, backing trucks up past parking spots, not sure that's always the best alternative. Although I like that the loading bays are inside, so you really can't, see a lot of what's going on there if you're looking from the street, even though there is going to be some protection there. So overall, I like it. I like a lot of the design guidelines that they have without making it overbearing, which, as Darren noted out earlier, Combine was a real bear there for a while. The concept in its basis was fantastic, but the guidelines were just too extensive. So I give the city a lot of credit for coming back and changing those. So going into this project, I'm happy we have some guidelines. I think it's going to help further this project along so people can know what they're going to get into and design it right. Thank you.
Mr. Gibson.
Thank you. I agree that this sort of buildings are absolutely needed. I think there's not only a shortage, but probably a line of people looking for this type of a building, especially some of the smaller side. We've seen some ones that are much larger than this, but I think ones in this smaller size are desperately needed, and I don't even know where you find them right now that are available. Where I find myself, I like the architectural style requirements on 122 and the site requirements on 124. I think the fence that's identified as style is attractive. Where I'm getting hung up really is that I'm not sure that the building that's actually being proposed for Lot 1 fits a lot of this. I'm perfectly prepared to support this project again as a redesign into the 6 units and to the scope and size and the style of the buildings. I just am not sure if we approve this, I'm just not clear what's going to happen with building number 1, because I don't think it complies with a lot of the things that we're being asked to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Gibson. Commissioner Covarrubias.
Thank you. I am also in favor of the design. I like the idea that there's a design plan and some of the requirements. I don't have any issues with the 6 lots themselves. My original question, or one of my questions, did not get answered. I guess it's really not that important, is if there was already a tenant in mind. I think the uses for these lots in general are going to be interesting. I do think there's a demand. I guess there's also a clarity. There's 6 lots. Is the owner, is Mr. Thorndike intending to sell each individual lot and allow the buyer to then construct their own building? Is he planning to develop all these lots and then lease them? Again, I don't know that needs to be answered in the sense that, the design plans and the guidance and those things I think will protect the style of buildings that are being proposed. So I'm okay with that. But as always, I do have an issue with parking. Parking is always a big issue, and I understand that can't be identified 100% until the use is identified. So I guess there's some protection there, and I know some adjustments can be made. But overall, I do agree. I do think the city needs developments like this, commercial buildings, industrial buildings, warehouse facilities, much needed in our area. So I'm prepared to approve the project, just making sure that we're all on the same page and understand exactly what we are approving. So those are my comments for now.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
I said earlier, I like this project, and I know we try to envision what it will be, but I actually think the flexibility that Mr. Thorndike has is going to meet a need. We can see some really exciting things happen here. I like the fact that sometimes we're looking at parking, and I looked at circulation in the very beginning, but we've gone from, a development subdivided from 8 into 6 lots, so it's kind of spacious. I really do look to, a business person like Mr. Brown who says there's a real need. I'm very willing to support this project.
Mr. Jorgensen.
I also, in general, am supportive of this project. I do have a concern about storage yards on Wisteria, and I don't believe I could be supportive of that, even if it's fenced or landscaped. And the site, a couple of discrepancies that I just am concerned that in the future, when DRC comes back 2 years from now and tries to decipher this, they'll wonder which way to go. The one that I mentioned previously about there's supposed to be an entrance on the interior access road as well, but yet it's not shown, which is it. And also in the architectural guidelines, it indicates that, this is page 122, any roll-up doors or large industrial openings to be designed in a manner that does not distract from the main entry and/or is recessed with an architectural element to prevent a flat wall surface viewable from the street. I don't think those doors should be viewable from the street at all. That statement's fine. It's just that that implies that there could, to me, that implies that there could be an opening like that facing the street or viewable from the street, which I don't think it should have. That and getting rid of 4-foot fences. And my last comment is I also have a little bit of a challenge looking at the proposed architectural design for Lot 1 compared to what seemed to be, to me, superior design concepts in the architectural guidelines.
Sure, thank you. I have no doubts that the market is crying for more of this kind of space as the applicant's representative and some of the commissioners have spoken to. We have this kind of space on Combine to a degree, in my opinion. And it's not to say that it doesn't work here or doesn't belong here as well. I think there's a different standard here, however, because Wisteria is developed, I think, with a series of fairly high intensely developed uses with style and architectural materials that certainly are quite in contrast to what you find on Combine. And again, it's not an indictment that that doesn't work here because I think certainly it can. As Commissioner Gibson said, I'm a little perplexed by the architecture. And to be candid, when I first opened my packet and looked at it, and you have to realize that the images we have in our packet are quite small, I didn't even understand what I was looking at in the computer-generated drawings. They almost had a cartoonish quality to them. It got better when they were on the big screen here tonight. I could see them a little bit more, but as I stared at that building and I thought this is the precedent for 5 more buildings to come, I wasn't totally comfortable with that. And maybe it's just ignorance and understanding how it matches with the design guidelines. But seeing the overhead doors, the storage adjacent to Wisteria, the facade of this building, it's confusing to me as to how that fits and how that really works to be conducive with the surrounding uses within this particular part of town. So I struggle with that as a part of this. I think that the parking, the uses, and those kinds of things sort out quite naturally, and will do so with subsequent reviews and DRCs. My surmise here is that these will be sold to other entities who will obviously be developing within these standards. But again, I have a certain level of concern that's in my mind about this as a precedent with first building in Lot 1 and what that means to the rest of those. So that's a struggle for me as I go forward with this. That kind of summarizes where I'm at. Any other comments by commissioners that have come to light during our discussion, either in room or at home? Yes, Commissioner Christensen.
I guess it's more of a question maybe for Darren, just as I was kind of refresh my memory. The storage as being referred to here, is my understanding, there's quite a limitation on the type of storage that can be in that particular PD overlay already. Is that correct, Darren? From the original? Or would this change that entirely?
The PM zone.
Sorry, PM.
Is a little more restrictive than, for instance, the manufacturing zone or C3 zone. For instance, contractor yards, contractor services are not permitted.
So when we refer to storage
industrial. So the storage area, the outdoor area, is an accessory to the uses. So if I'm hearing the Planning Commission having concern over, the yard areas being seen from Wisteria, then my thought would be is there's a site-specific condition that I have that we can be more specific on. Condition number 11 on page 96 talks about storage, and we can specifically indicate that storage yards should not be located between the building and the street, or indicate on the side along Wisteria, if that's what the Planning Commission would like to say.
So back to kind of my overarching question, in the PM zone, my understanding is it's a far more restrictive to have a storage area, and even to get that approved with the original building design there would be a lot of scrutiny to what would be being stored there. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. The uses are typically done indoors. The applicant is wanting some type of accessory storage and have tried to show that here. And we have some conditions to help screen it, help show location. But what I'm hearing is those conditions should be more specific to explain that the storage areas need to be located behind the buildings.
Okay. That was it. Thank you.
So I'm trying to figure out a way to move forward. I'd like to support this project, proceeding, but I'm not comfortable with actually what's going on with Lot 1. Because as I expressed before, I don't think that what's being proposed actually fits the standards that we're being asked to approve. I would agree and be happy with an idea of having some sort of restrictive language of storage being visible or facing wisteria. But I'm not real sure how to move forward with the proposed building. I have no problem with the size of the building. I have an issue with, as Commissioner Jorgensen pointed out, the site design requirements don't seem to be being followed with that location, and I really am not happy with the architectural style of that, because just in my own humble opinion, that is not the same style as what's being proposed. And I get it that they're not going to look identical. I'm not asking them to be identical. I just don't like the style of what's being proposed. So it's not the size of the building. And I'd like to support this project and move it forward. I'm just trying to figure out how to get there.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners have comments? Otherwise, I'll ask if the applicant's representative has a final comment for us.
Thank you for allowing me to speak again. Just a couple comments is that this project was taken to DRC twice, and in that time zone, the commissioners switched. And at both DRC hearings, one thing that we were really pleased about is that we got comments on the style of the building and how much everybody liked the style of the building on Lot 1 and its architectural features. And so our resubmittals back in had mainly to do with the circulation, because the truck turning was asked of us, of landscaping, and then to create additional design requirements to be more specific on them. But the building design for Lot 1 and the architectural design proposed throughout this subdivision was never questioned to us at DRC, to the best of my recollection, and I just confirmed that with my client. And so, Commissioner Gibson, I'm wondering how I can answer your question, because the building proposed on Lot 1 has the clear story windows, it has the metal siding, it has a mix of materials. It fits the architectural site or guidelines as we've proposed them, and we're trying to allow future buildings to carry forward some of those same design elements, but not make them all exactly like what's on Lot 1. What was important, or what seemed like the DRC, both DRC commissions, liked the entrance on the corner, they liked the way the building was oriented towards the street, that the truck routing was in the interior, that landscaping was being provided, that there were different roof lines that were created. And so I think on page 123 is just sort of an idea of how an additional building could look that would fit those guidelines for one of the future lots. But what we're asking for approval tonight is what's on Lot 1, which is kind of a U-shaped building. And I wish that if the commission had had questions about the architectural design, that had been brought forward more at DRC. So we could have addressed them further, but as far as we were concerned and understood, there wasn't any problems with the architectural design of the building. The storage areas, as Darren said, are ancillary to the primary use that's going on the site. So as Darren has said, storage is not an allowed use in this zoning. So any kind of storage area is an ancillary use. And we even talked about in building 1, if you put a restaurant there that had outdoor seating, that it wouldn't be a storage area then for equipment or, other things, that it would be an outdoor seating area that would look really attractive from the street. So it depends on each unit that it's going in. And we thought, and what was proposed to DRC, what was proposed to city staff was that the areas immediately in front of the storage areas between the public street and the storage area would be heavily landscaped in that tiered landscaping that I spoke to you about before. And so is there other questions I could answer Commissioner Gibson that would help you understand the architectural guidelines or what directions we were given before?
Excuse me. I want to minimize the back and forth between commissioners. And so if you could quickly kind of address that point since we did close the hearing.
No, I think we just have a difference of opinion. I don't see any access as such as is suggested in this building, especially when it has 3 tenants. I don't see any access other than from the street on 2 of the units. I'm not understanding the ingress and egress. And I particularly don't like what it's probably the architects or the engineers are going to cringe, but we refer to as a negative slope shed roof on the building.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. All right. Any other thinking by the commission and or emotion on this?
I'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Christensen, you have the floor.
I move that we approve draft resolution A for PD 20-16 and tentative track map 3191, subject conditions of approval. There's a couple clarifications. I want to make sure I get this correct. Noting the changes for dates, Darren mentioned earlier, that was from January 10th to February 14th in, was it 3 locations or 2 locations?
2 locations, page 95 and page 98.
Okay. And additional to that, was there also a change in the access width that needed to be noted?
Page 104, we would check access road 20 feet and uncheck the one that says 26 on the next page.
Correct. That's what I have for my note. I just didn't have the page number. Page 104 as part of my motion. Thank you.
We have a motion with those points of modification. Is there a second?
This is Commissioner Covarrubias. I'll second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Christensen, second from Commissioner Covarrubias. Is there further discussion by the commission? Commissioner Davis. Yeah.
Would we like to address at all the encouragement of putting storage areas towards the back?
That's a good point. That was an item that I think that Darren mentioned. He had an idea, recommendation for change, clarifying the storage. I don't remember what you recommended, Darren.
So that's condition number 11 on page 96. Storage yard areas should not be located between the building and the street or between the building and the interior driveway. So I think the intent would be, what I heard tonight is we just indicate that storage yard areas shall be located behind the buildings.
So for clarification, if it's storage, is that correct? Is that what we're saying?
Outdoor storage.
Outdoor storage, which is already ancillary to the use in that PM zone, which is already very restrictive, because I have already researched that for other reasons there, and I can tell you it's extremely restrictive. So I would be okay with adding that into my motion.
Okay, and I would ask Darren if you would clarify exactly what we were adding in there.
I would change condition number 11 to say, we can call it accessory storage areas. Accessory storage yard areas shall be located behind the buildings, and we could indicate not visible from the public street.
Okay. You find that
So I
acceptable?
move. Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there other discussion points? I have one for consideration by the motion maker. The applicant's representative did a good job, I think, describing what happens in the timeline of an approval that DRC's changed. And it was offered by staff that there could be a condition that said that all building design, I think it was, for the lots would have to come back to the Planning Commission rather than the DRC. And I would suggest, in this case, that would be appropriate. So I would ask if there's consideration for that as part of the motion.
This would have to. I'm sorry. You're saying that was a recommendation, that your recommendation or the applicant was recommending that?
I guess it's an opinion that I would like to see that as a part of the motion, just given the complexities of this with parking, different uses and things, to bring that back to the full Planning Commission rather than just the DRC, because DRC's changed.
Okay, so I have a little reluctance on it, but I think that the design, I was on DRC when this came forward a couple times, and the design guidelines and the design of that building, would I build that building? Probably not so much, but I mean, I didn't have any real problems with the effort that they made. I think I'd rather hear some other comment from other commissioners on that thought first, if you don't mind.
That's fair. Are there any other comments?
This is Commissioner Covarrubias. Chairperson Kogler, just for clarity, you're proposing that the other 5 lots, the design of the facilities on those 5 lots, when they are designed, they come back to the full commission versus just DRC. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. On the surface, I don't think I have an issue with that at all. Because I think the uses, as I think it's already been alluded to, the uses are going to really define a lot of that. So I don't have a problem with it having to come back to the full commission if that's what it takes to keep this thing moving forward.
Good, thank you. Other comments by anybody? Commissioner Gibson, sorry, I need to look both ways.
I would support that. I just think there's a lot of inconsistencies, and honestly, whether it's this group of people or somebody else down the road on DRC a few months from now, I don't know how they're going to, the guidelines are not at all clear to me. Like I said, I think there's a lot of conflicts. The other thing that I point out is I believe that page 93 and 97, the language need to be corrected, as was pointed out, because there is the stormwater system actually is in part of the public right away, and right now it says they're not.
Mr. Jorgensen.
I also support your proposal to bring this back to the Planning Commission. I do think it's a rather intricate, complex site with a lot of moving parts. And just also to point out, as we all know, that when a project is reviewed by DRC for recommendation to the Planning Commission, is just that, it's a recommendation. Just as when Planning Commission reviews something that is for recommendation to the City Council, they can take our advice under advisement. And so that's just a separate comment, but I would support your proposal.
Okay, thank you. So we've gauged the commission's thoughts on it coming back to the commission, but I think Commissioner Gibson also raises a valid point. And will there be cleanup, I guess, and how would that occur on the issue of the public utility easement and encouragement? Yes, Mr. Nash.
Yes, on Commissioner Gibson's comments on page 93, the finding on F is specifically related to access. So it doesn't apply to the stormwater situation that we discussed. This is saying the subdivision design and type of improvements proposed in the tentative map will not conflict with easements acquired by the public at large for access through or use subject to site because of no such easements. So I think it's pertaining specifically to access and not prohibiting access.
So, and I'm glad you pointed that out because I had that in a note right here. I hear what my fellow commissioners are saying. I would be in favor of coming back to Planning Commission if that moves us along and we could come to terms with that. I would be in favor of that, and that's to my motion.
And Commissioner Gibson?
Okay. Page 97 clearly states that the proposed stormwater basins shall be installed on-site and not overlying the public utility easement. And I'm under the clear understanding that's not true. So that
Well, it isn't, because we're going to change it down to 10 on condition number 7,
okay,
which would then take it out. That would not then be an issue.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and I believe that motion includes now the remaining 5 lots will come back to the Planning Commission rather than DRC for approval. Is that acceptable to the second maker who's up there, I guess? Commissioner Covarrubias? I believe
that is acceptable.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
We have a motion that's been amended and has those conditions attached to it. Do you positively have anything to add, Ms. Giardini, or because we're about to take action?
We are not in favor of it coming back to the Planning Commission for each of the additional lots. The intent from the very beginning of this was that each of the lots are going through this plan development so that they simply have to come back for site plan review. Why make us go through all this review, do all these design guidelines, show you the potential lot layout, show you the potential parking requirements, and then turn around and make us come back and redo it all for each individual lot? I understand that DRC is a recommendation to Planning Commission, but none of these issues came up in DRC, and it's now making it as if we should not have applied for a plan development overlay at all. You're basically saying denial of the project and each lot comes back before Planning Commission. That causes a huge problem for the owner and for selling of the lots, because if they have to come back to Planning Commission, it's a great big deal and expense versus just going to DRC. That's why we went through the process of laying all of these requirements out and bringing it to DRC twice and sharing all our materials with you. So we're opposed to the condition that you're adding it, that it comes back, that each lot come back to Planning Commission. And if that's going to be your motion, most likely we'll appeal it to the City Council.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Appeal to the City Council is always the prerogative of anybody. Also, the commissioners, if they feel that that's an unjust condition in this particular case, can certainly vote no in this, and we can come back with another motion. So with that standing, we have a motion on the floor in a second. Any last minute discussion? Ms. Covarrubias, any more?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, I'll ask staff to please call the roll.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson?
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes 6-0 with Neil abstaining and having left the room.
Okay. All right, I think we have to get Commissioner Neal back. Maybe we take a 5-minute stretch break, no more than 5. And then we'll be back here at 9:15 and we'll get on with the rest of the agenda. Okay, this is the 1 minute warning. We said 9:15, we're coming back in 1 minute.
That's what I'm saying. Figure it out.
Appreciate the small one.
Okay, Mr. Covarrubias, do we have you back?
I am here.
Perfect. We are present as well, so we're convening back to order the Planning Commission meeting. We are now moving into public hearing number 3 for the evening, which is Oxford Hotel Phase 2, AMD 22-07, PD 13-03, P14-0001. Property is located at 800 4th Street, APN 009-291-022. The applicant is Matisse, I think, for Oxford Suites. Do we have a staff report, please?
Hey, thank you, Chairperson Kogler. This is Katie Bannister, Associate Planner, and I apologize for not being able to join you in person this evening. I'm hoping my screen is showing for everybody.
It is.
Excellent. Okay,
wait a sec, Katie, are you doing
please.
a screen share?
Yes.
Okay, hang on a sec. They're seeing my screen. Let me get you up.
It looks like Katie's.
It looks very, but it's not. All right, go ahead, Katie.
Okay. So as Mr. Kogler announced, this is an amendment to the second phase of the Oxford Suites Hotel located on
Katie, we lost your sound.
Yes, I'm here talking to myself. Okay, so this is the Oxford Suites. This is an amendment to the phase 2 of the hotel. So here is a map of the south end of the west side of town. You can see 1st Street at the bottom of the screen and 4th Street towards the north, towards the top of the screen. In the red box is the existing Oxford Suites Hotel, and I'm going to
Katie, you're muted again. Katie. There we go.
I didn't mute myself that time, so I'm not. I'll watch it, but that was strange. So I'm not sure how much you heard. So the orange star shows where there's a pad that was graded with the original project with phase 1 that always anticipated a phase 2, which is what we're here to consider this evening. So here's a timeline of the Oxford Suites Hotel. The development plan for the project was approved in 2014. It went through building permit, the building permit process, and the building was, the phase 1 building was completed in 2019. The site improvements at that time included 144 parking spaces, the swimming pool, and then of course there was the main hotel tower, which is 101 guest rooms and almost 2,000 square feet of meeting space. At that time, phase 2 was proposed to have 24 guest rooms and an additional almost 3,500 square feet of meeting space. So today we're looking at an amendment to, instead of having the 3,500 square feet of meeting space, to increase the number of guest rooms by 13 to 37 guest rooms. So the completed project, if this amendment were approved, would have a total of 138 guest rooms and just the existing 1,848 square feet of meeting space. So existing conditions, as I said, the first phase of the project is complete and has been in operation for a number of years. Here's a picture of the site from 4th Street. The red circle shows approximately where that new tower would be located. So looking back at the approved phase 2, so here in blue is the existing phase 1 that's been constructed. You can see it on the site plan there, and then at the bottom we're looking from 4th Street towards the south. So the blue is the constructed phase of the project, and then in red is where that proposed phase 2 will be located. So now we're looking at what is now proposed for the site plan. Again, similar to what was approved in red there, and now in red in that same building pad, a new building is proposed. So existing conditions, this is looking west on 4th Street. You can see the graded pad that's waiting for phase 2, and then the existing phase 1 building there in the background. So looking at what is proposed now, so up on the top right was what was approved, and down here on the bottom is what is now proposed. Phase 1 is shown there in white, and then phase 2 is shown in color. As you can see, very similar to what was originally approved, and also using the same materials as what was originally approved and is existing on the current phase 1 building. There is a bridge proposed between the two buildings. It was originally approved to be to have a bridge across all stories 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I apologize, it would be 2, 3, 4, and 5. The current proposal would just have that bridge on floors 2, 3, and 4. Here we are looking at the south elevation. So this is facing Niblick Street, Niblick Road. There was a question at the DRC about what would be under that bridge. There's an existing patio under that bridge, and my understanding is that is intended to remain. It would just be under or partially under that bridge. The bridge is relatively narrow. Looking at the remaining elevations, the west elevation is what would be between the buildings, and so it won't really be seen from offsite all that much. The east elevation is what would face Highway 101. Originally, this was shown to have an extra sign on it, which would have put two wall-facing signs facing Highway 101, and the DRC asked that one of them be removed. So the sign that's on the existing phase 1 of the building will remain, and no new signage is proposed on this second phase tower. Looking at the floor plans, they really are just hotel rooms. This is the first floor. There's a lobby and then some guest suites. I didn't include the second to fourth floor floor plans. They are just guest suites. And then on the 5th floor, you've got some guest suites, but there's also a roof deck and then some roof-mounted HVAC equipment. The DRC had questions about screening of that rooftop equipment. I've got it there in orange circled. The applicant did provide us with a new section that shows that any mechanical equipment that's proposed on the roof will not exceed the parapet height that is also proposed there. So we won't be able to see any new mechanical equipment from the ground. Next, moving on to parking. The parking for a hotel in the Uptown Town Center specific plan in the TC2 zone is to provide one hotel room per guest room, one parking space per guest room, and then one parking space for each employee on the largest shift. In addition, any sort of accessory uses that are open to the public are meant to be parked at a 1 to 1,200 square feet rate. So at the completion of this hotel, there would be 138 rooms. We have some new parking analysis that was provided today in an addendum to the agenda that shows that on the largest shift, there are 10 employees, and the applicant reports that the meeting spaces that are in the hotel today are not open to the public. Those are just for guests of the hotel. If those were open to the public, they would still have a relatively low parking requirement of just 2 spaces. So by the Uptown Town Center specific plan, it would imply that 148 parking spaces would be needed for the project. The site planning has already been completed on this project, and there are just 144 parking spaces on the site. There is a small difference there, but the applicant has provided an analysis in that addendum, and I think we'll be speaking towards the gap there as well. I do want to point out and here's the applicant's analysis if we want to look at it. It basically shows a rundown of when guests are parking on the site and when employees are most likely to be on the site. Essentially, when guests are off wine tasting and enjoying the beautiful Paso Robles, that's when the employees come in and clean the rooms and do maintenance tasks. And so there doesn't tend to be as much conflict between guest and employee parking. I did want to point out that in the Uptown Town Center specific plan for downtown buildings, and this is definitely stretching the intent of this code, but if the Planning Commission was inclined to want to approve the project as designed, if Phase 2 had been built back 3 years ago with the rest of the project, and then wanted to convert that meeting space into hotel rooms, the specific plan actually would not call for additional parking to be provided for that area. So that might be one justification that the Planning Commission would want to consider. There is also within the Uptown Town Center specific plan provision for using offsite parking. We went through this with some other projects in the not too distant future, and we can certainly explore that if needed this evening. Looking at the landscape, I went and walked the site late last week, and the landscaping is in really good condition. It's been trimmed down for the winter, so it's not in its most lush form, but definitely very tidy and clean and looking very sharp. Some pictures here off to the left. This is the landscape plan that was included with the original approvals, and so there are some conditions of approval that would require that landscaping to be maintained as the project, as Phase 2 goes forward. There's one area where the landscaping has just fallen into a little bit of disrepair along Pine Street. It's understandable with our recent rains, but there's also a condition of approval that would require the erosion control measures just to be maintained a bit better on Pine Street before we final the permit for Phase 2. In addition, the city engineer would like to see the site distance at the corner of 4th and Pine Streets addressed, and here's a picture of that intersection. And so there's also a condition of approval that would require that. So getting into those conditions of approval, first of all, all the conditions in the original approval of the project would remain in effect. Those were approved back in 2014 by the Planning Commission. In addition, there's conditions related to screening rooftop equipment, how many signs can face Highway 101. And here's our landscape conditions, that any landscape that's damaged during construction would be replaced. The erosion control on Pine Street would be addressed. And then one things, the landscape areas really could use a new layer of mulch. And so that's a condition there before Phase 2 is complete. And then, as I said, to improve the site distance at the corner of 4th and Pine Streets. In order to approve this amendment to the development plan, the Planning Commission would need to make a list of findings. You would need to find that the project is consistent with all the goals and policies of the many plans and codes and standards we have here in the city. You would need to find that the project won't be detrimental to the neighborhood, that it accommodates the aesthetic quality of the city as a whole, that the project is compatible with the surrounding uses, and also that it's compatible with our existing scenic and environmental resources we have here in Paso Robles. This project is, the impacts of this amended project are consistent with the impacts that were anticipated by the mitigated negative declaration that was approved for the project back in 2014. There's some analysis in your staff report that goes into vehicle miles traveled, which would be one of the kind of bigger changes to CEQA since this project was approved. And projects that are located within a half mile of our train station are exempt from that vehicle miles traveled analysis. The Planning Commission does have options. The first would be to adopt the draft resolution provided to approve the amendment to the development plan for the Oxford Suites Hotel. You could amend and adopt the draft resolution. You could refer the project back to staff or the DRC for additional analysis, or you could deny the project based on a determination that the project doesn't meet one or more of the required findings. The original approval for phase 2 would still be in effect under that scenario. That approval is not null and void. Staff's recommendation is to approve the project by adopting the draft resolution that's provided. And that concludes my report. I welcome your questions. And we do have both the architect and Mr. Matisse from Oxford Suites with us this evening to answer your questions as well.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Let me see if there's any immediate questions from commissioners, and otherwise we'll hear from the applicant and then move into subsequent questions. Anything right off the bat? Seeing none in chambers, Commissioner Covarrubias, any initial questions?
No, I'll hold off for now.
Okay, very good. Then I'll ask the applicant or representative if they have comments they would like to make.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Yeah.
Identify yourself if you would.
Yes, sir. This is Brett Mateus. 800 4th Street is the project I'm representing. And thank you, everybody, for taking your time to meet with us on this late Valentine's Day. And I hope that Katie did a great job of explaining our goals and desires with this new build. And one of the issues right there, the chart that's up on the screen right now, is one that we worked on and I presented and sent earlier today. And I hope that you guys have had a chance to read it and understand that, you know, how we got to this parking analysis. And you can see that our staffing and our parking has ebbs and flows in our parking lot and at our hotels. It's fairly standard. And we staff the project such that the quietest part of the day, when the guests are gone, that's when most of our staff is doing the work, doing the housekeeping, doing the maintenance, prepping for the evening and so forth. So we believe that what we have planned for is 6 additional parking stalls for the for our employee parking. And through this analysis, you can see the averages. We have an average of 6 employees, and we have only 73% of the parking being used. I'm looking at the bottom line here, with 37 excess stalls. So that's you know, the average throughout the 24-hour period. But you can see that if you go through the excess stalls just really quickly, you see we have 120 excess stalls at 1 o'clock to 3. And then the point at which we have no excess stalls is from 9 to 11. That's when we're assuming all the employees are, or I should say all the guests are parked, and we have 6 employees at that time. It's very quiet at that point of the evening. The other thing that I'd like to point out is the parking, the ebbs and flows of the parking is quite interesting in a hotel parking lot. This is a large parking lot, 144 stalls is what we have right now. And so there's economies of scale that when you have a large parking lot, both these ratios offset each other and we have all this excess parking. You can go by our hotel and you can drive by any time and you'll see that there's plenty of parking. So we hope that this analysis just makes good sense to all involved. And our goal, of course, is we want to maximize our guest experience, our employee experiences. We're ranked number 2 on TripAdvisor in Paso Robles, which is the world's largest travel website. And we aim to be number 1. That's our goal. And that is by keeping both the staff and our guests happy at all times. So that's what I have.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mateus. I'd apologize for mispronouncing your name earlier. Thank you for that clarification. Questions by the commission for staff and/or applicants representative or the applicant? Start with Commissioner Christensen.
The only question I had, Katie, was in regards to the previously approved, I think it was a conference room, meeting room. Is that how it was referred to? Anyway, what would have been the standard for parking for that with the same number, with the previous number of rooms? Did you have that number by any chance?
So the analysis is provided in the from the original approvals is provided as a as an attachment. There was a memo produced. I believe there was a parking requirement that was relatively high for the meeting rooms when it was first approved, but then that was reduced over time. The specific plan was amended, and so that you only have to park at like 30% of what would normally be required, knowing that there would be some overlap between people staying in the hotel and the use of those guest rooms. Let me see if I can grab that that memo quickly. And get you the actual number, but it was like I said, the memo from I think it's like 2019 did make it clear that that requirement had been reduced over time. Get there.
I think it was.
So it isn't. Yeah, it's on page 137 of your staff report. It looks like, yeah. So the meeting space was originally supposed to provide 1 to 400 parking spaces, one parking space for every 400 square feet. So a total of 13 spaces would have been required.
Okay, but it's come down from that. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Commissioner Neal. Mr. Gibson.
I was on DRC, and our questions have been affirmatively answered by the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Covarrubias.
Thank you. Hey, Katie, just a clarification. I know the parking was a big conversation piece at the last DRC. My understanding that this facility has a restaurant, yes? Katie?
I'm not familiar with there being a restaurant in the hotel. Breck, maybe you could fill us in, or I've not been in that in the lobby there.
Yes, this is Brett Mateus again. Yes, we do have a restaurant. It's for guest use only, and so
you just answered my question. So it is for guest use only.
Correct.
Okay. All right. That was my only question to confirm on the parking issue. On the roof deck, is there fencing around that roof deck?
There is a screen wall, and code is 42 inches, so it'll be at least 42 inches tall.
At least 42 inches tall. And then you mentioned the bridge that's going to be connecting the two towers. Nothing underneath the bridge itself is changing. The existing arrangement or floor plan that you have, I believe it's a small gathering area right now. That's not going to change?
Correct.
So
that
is there
will remain
access?
The same.
Okay, is there access from the exterior side, meaning could somebody on these streets walk in through that access, or is it only accessible through the hotel?
As far as, let me ask you a question. So are you saying access to the bridge or access to underneath the bridge?
Underneath the bridge.
Yeah, it'll be to and through. If we go back to that elevation, you can see it's just open.
It is just open. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. No other questions.
There you go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, Katie, and then probably a question for Mr. Mateus. Katie, could you describe where the square footage is coming from? Where's the conference room? And is that taking square footage from building phase 1? Explain how that works.
So no changes are proposed to phase one. The change would come in phase two. So originally there was meeting space proposed on the first floor of phase two. That would now be all hotel rooms. And so there would be no meeting space in phase two. It would be all guest rooms.
So there's not an existing conference room being taken away. Gotcha. So the concept of a conference room or meeting room. Then I guess either one of you could answer this question. I come from the tourism industry, and it's not really pertinent because it's not my business plan and it's not my purview tonight, but this town needs meeting rooms, and we've long tried to attract the business traveler. What was the thinking about taking away meeting rooms?
I think the strategy behind that is that we're set up for guest experience and not outside conferencing. And so that is the grand plan with our marketing.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Okay. All right, Mr. Jorgensen.
No questions.
Okay. I have no questions. I would compliment the applicant on the material you supplied in the parking analysis. That was very helpful, I think, for me understanding lodging parking as a whole, and it was kind of eye-opening. And so, again, very well done. I have no questions. This is a public hearing. We are going to open the public hearing on this evening and ask if there are comments from anybody in the room who would like to speak to this project. If so, please advance to the podium and state your name and address. I see none in chambers. Do we have any callers?
No callers.
We do not. We'll go back to chambers one more time. Hearing none, seeing none, I will close the public hearing, bring this back to the Planning Commission for discussion and eventual action. Start with Commissioner Davis.
Oh, I've already said I was a little disappointed taking the meeting rooms away, but it's not my business plan. My observation is that the landscaping has been slight, and I would like to see more robust landscaping in this next phase, and maybe even some consideration of how to beautify that enclosed bridge. I know that, Katie, you mentioned that there was going to be landscaping replaced through the construction process, but I think a little bit of TLC on landscaping would make a more attractive building or project.
Okay. Commissioner Jorgensen.
No comment.
No comments. Commissioner Covarrubias.
No additional comments.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Christensen.
No additional comments.
Commissioner Neal.
No comments.
Commissioner Gibson.
No comments.
Okay. And I was on DRC when this came before us as well, and I don't have any additional comments. I support the project. Is there a motion that somebody would like to offer?
Yes, I'd like to.
Commissioner Neal.
I'd like to move approval of draft resolution A, approving amendment 22-07 to development plan 13-003 based on findings and subject to conditions of approval.
I'll second that.
We have a motion from Commissioner Neal, seconded by Commissioner Christensen. Any further discussion from anybody in chambers or Mr. Covarrubias?
No other comments.
Okay. Hearing none, I'll ask staff to please call the roll.
Commissioner Neal?
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson?
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to the fourth of 5 public hearings this evening. This is public hearing conditional use permit for a new AT&T stealth wireless facility, CUP 22-03, P22-0022. The address of this project is 2218 Riverside Avenue. It's the Pioneer Museum site. The applicant is AT&T Yukon Group, and I believe we have a representative who will speak to this. I would ask first for a staff report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, this is a request for a conditional use permit for a cellular facility at the Pioneer Museum on Riverside Avenue. The design is a water tank project, and it would have a height that would go up to 60 feet tall. The proposal is to include this out in the front area near the parking lot, near the schoolhouse building, where this facility would be located. There would be equipment building adjacent to it in the vicinity there of the existing schoolhouse building.
Hey, Darren, this is Commissioner Covarrubias. I'm not seeing this on the site, on the screen.
We'll see if we can fix that.
We'll pause the meeting. Hang on one second. How's that, Robert?
Thank you.
So the project's designed to be 60 feet tall, a water tank design within the area where there's existing buildings, the flagpole and the windmill. Equipment building would be approximately 20 feet back from Riverside Avenue. And just for scale purposes, the flagpole is 65 feet tall. The DRC did review this project, had some questions regarding the equipment building, any signage, and a landscaping. So the plans that you'll see tonight, I've worked with Mr. Ambrose on this project. The equipment building was originally a shed-type roof with materials that really didn't match the project. It's been redesigned to have a gable-type roof, have some siding, colors, and materials to be similar to what the schoolhouse building would have. And we'll show you some plans for that here quickly. They are proposing some signage on the water tank. It's a Pioneer Museum. It's individual metal letters applied to the tank. They would be painted or powder coated, a black letter, and no lighting is proposed at this time. Also did work to get some landscaping, get some shrubs between the back of the sidewalk and that short existing wall along Riverside Avenue, and then turn the corner down Gregory Street, just to get that dirt area spruced up there with this project. And then this project would meet the intent of the ordinance for being camouflaged, the antennas. So here's some photo simulations. On the left is existing, on the right is the proposal. This is standing at 21st and Riverside looking back south. You can see on the right-hand side the row of shrubs in front of the wall at the back of sidewalk. This is inside, standing in the parking lot area looking north. If you look at the right-hand side, you can see one of the questions at DRC was fencing. This is a metal fencing that is mainly just for security and protection from keeping people from going under the tower. And I think that's what the DRC was thinking that would be necessary. No other fencing is shown with the project. And this is standing in the ball field, kind of looking to the west. This is a little hard to see, but this is just showing a kind of a site plan. So this is the tower facility here, the building. This is the schoolhouse, and the equipment building is right here at the back of the schoolhouse. This is the wall along with Riverside Avenue. Here's some elevations. This is starting to show kind of the signage. If you look back at this building, there's some existing signage on the tractor area here, and the proposal is to use the same font, similar size letter and type as here up on the tank. More elevations. This is indicating the tower and that the antennas themselves are located within the water tank itself. Then this is the equipment building. So what this is showing is this is a horizontal siding up to a point. This is an open area, and then the roof with composition shingles to match what's done on the schoolhouse. They're showing some chain link and slat gates. Those are facing the west, so those would be visible from Riverside Avenue. So I have a condition in here to do something more metal, wrought iron, similar to the other materials being used instead of the chain link there. So this is a request for the use permit for the Planning Commission to review. We've got conditions of approval. I believe I have a condition that talks about the final signage to come back to DRC, and any lighting have to come back. But at this point, they're not proposing any lighting for the signage. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Darren. Is there anybody representing the applicant that would like to address the commission?
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Jerry Ambrose. I'm here on behalf of AT&T. I don't have anything to add to Darren's presentation. As he mentioned, we did our best to address the DRC comments, and we're asking for your approval as proposed. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you for your comments, and thank you for sticking with us on what's a longer than average agenda for us. Yes.
We've talked on the phone a few times, never met person. Paul Viborg, 2775 Santa Rita Road. Represent Pioneer Foundation, which represents Pioneer Museum, Pioneer Day Committee, and Jeansville Pump. So it's a big plus for us, get monthly income, good and bad years, so we can put it to good use. So hope you approve this cell tower. Thank you.
Thank you. We weren't even to the public hearing yet, but we'll assume you would make that comment during the public hearing. That enthusiasm is great. We're at the question point for staff or the applicant. Any questions by commissioners? I'll just ask randomly. If anybody has questions, just please raise them.
I always have a question.
Commissioner Davis.
Yes, I think it looks so cool, but my question, I just wanted restated. Darren, does it go to you, staff? Is the equipment locked? We have field trips, students climbing, kids climbing fences. Is it locked? Is it really secure from someone, getting in there who shouldn't?
And I'll let Mr. Ambrose answer
Great.
that operational question.
Yeah.
Do I answer one at a time or all?
Why don't you go ahead on this one?
Okay, sorry. Your question was about the fencing that we're putting around the base of the tower. Yeah, that would be 100% locked.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. I'd love.
Okay. Mr. Jorgensen.
I like it too. But I'm not clear on what the material is. What is the tank, quote unquote? What is the material?
Yeah, the material is what we call RF friendly, transparent material. In other words, the antenna signal can propagate through the material. It's made of essentially a foam core with fiberglass on the inside and the outside of it. And then the outside is textured to match wood, a wood texture.
Thank you.
But from the outside, it looks, you don't know what it is. It looks like wood.
Mr. Covarrubias, any questions?
Thank you. I was on DRC, and I just wanted to commend Jerry and his team for addressing all the changes or the challenges we had during DRC. So no, I don't have any other further questions.
Okay. Mr. Christensen.
I was on DRC as well, and I will just echo Commissioner Covarrubias' comments.
Okay. Commissioner Neal.
No questions.
Mr. Gibson.
I think it looks cool too, and it occurred to me this is probably going to give some income to Pioneer Museums. That was a real plus.
I just have one question. You ever done a water tower before to hide cell antennas?
Have you ever done one before?
Yes.
Yeah, we've done several. Yes.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of them around SLO County.
All right. Good to know.
Here and there.
Okay, that's the question round. I will open the public hearing. This is a public hearing. If anybody would like to speak, and we'll just take Mr. Vibert's comments and assume you haven't changed your mind. You're still very enthusiastically supporting the project? Perfect. Any other comments from anybody in the room they'd like to make on this project? Do we have any callers?
No callers.
Seeing and hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring this back to the commission for discussion and action. Does anybody have an action on this, perhaps? I thought you might.
Yeah. All right. I would like to recommend that we approve draft resolution A, attachment 4, approving conditional use permit 22-03, subject to site-specific conditions of approval.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second from Commissioner Gibson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, I'll ask staff to please call the roll.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson?
Aye.
Commissioner Neal?
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Cove-Rubius?
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, thank you. Okay, we have another similar request, conditional use permit for AT&T Stealth Wireless Facility, P22-0018, CUP 22-02. The address of this project is 2906 Spring Street, APN 008-810-020. The applicant is Mr. Ambrose, who's present tonight for AT&T. I would ask for staff report, please.
Is this you on the screen share?
So I would like to, if that's all right, please.
Katie, you should be good to go.
Excellent, thank you. So we do have another request for another CUP for a cell tower, also for AT&T with the Yukon Group representing AT&T. So let me move on to my map. So this project is located on the north side of Spring Street between 28th and 30th. Let me zoom in a bit. So this is the site of the Paso Robles laundromat, and there's a car wash on just to the south that shares the parking lot as well, to get people familiar with where we are talking. And the cell tower will be where that red star is. So here is the site plan. Here's the existing laundromat building in yellow. The car wash is there in blue, and then in red is where the cell tower would be installed. So this cell tower is proposed to be disguised as a tree up in the, these are some photo simulations of what the project would look like. Up in the top right is existing, and then in the main field is is proposed. So you can see there, this is proposed to be a eucalyptus tree. So up on the top right, it's not there, and then in the main screen there it is. From the north of the site, there's some apartments to the north of the project, and looking from their parking area, I think that would be from 28th Street. You can see the tower there that's on that property to the south. And then from Park Street, you would be able to see it over the houses there as well. And finally, from the parking lot, this is an image of what the tree would look like. So this is a proposed eucalyptus. It is proposed with a height exception for the zone. So the proposed tree would be 57 feet tall. The antennas are maxed out at 52 feet in height, but the branches would continue taller up to 57 feet. There are some existing trees to either side of the faux tree. There's some real trees it would be the east. There's a 52-foot tall tree, and then to the west, there's a 49-foot tall tree. The applicant is proposing that those trees be trimmed to some degree. There's a condition of approval included in the draft resolution that would preclude them from trimming below 45 feet in height as a starting point, is something to discuss to try to keep the adjacent trees to be somewhat similar in height to this tree, because it really does help to mask a tree when there's other trees nearby that are of similar height. The maximum height in the T4F zoning district is 36 feet in height, so there is a height exception being requested. So wireless communication facilities are, there's some design requirements that are provided in the municipal code. They are meant to be integrated into functional facilities when that's possible. There are no functional facilities in the vicinity of this project, and so the tree is being proposed. Stealth design is required. It is meant to make the structure be designed to closely blend into the surrounding environment and to be minimally visible and to appear as if they're part of the existing landscape. So that's the intent of the tree that's proposed. And then there's some other standards. The monopole should not be greater in diameter and so forth. The tower needs to be located outside of building setbacks. It needs to adhere to the existing height limitations of the zone. And the next screen explains what we can do to consider a height exception. But the towers are subject to our noise ordinance, and they do have to have radio frequencies in compliance with FCC standards. So the height that's proposed is 57 feet. 36 feet is what is allowed in the zone. The municipal code says that the facilities are meant to comply with the development standards except when it's impractical or technologically infeasible. The applicant has the burden of proving that that it's technologically infeasible to do their project at a lower height. So to that end, the applicant has provided a series of maps that show what kind of wireless coverage they will achieve at different heights. So what we are seeing here right now is without the project. So in green is the indoor signal that would folks would receive from AT&T. Either right now we're seeing it without this tower. So this is what folks are already receiving. In yellow is what you would receive in a vehicle, and then in purple is indicated to be an outdoor signal. So now when we add a project at 32 feet, if the tower was only 32 feet tall, this is the amount of indoor signal that would be transmitted to folks needing to get a cell signal. You can see there's still some gaps there in the in the northwest part of town. When the tower moves up to 42 feet, you've got a pretty solid green block on most of the north of 24th part of the west side of town. Some gaps up in the hills there, and not getting too much coverage on the east side of the freeway. When you move up to 52 feet, which is the proposed height, those gaps start filling in a bit more. You get a bit more coverage south of 24th Street, but I'm going to move back to 42 feet so you can see that it's not a huge difference. It's incremental at each height, but this is, I think, an important distinction for the Planning Commission's consideration. So here's 42 feet, moving back to 52. Hopefully those aren't too big of a lag. So you can see it's not a huge amount of difference, but 10 feet is obviously a big difference in a landscape where you don't have a lot of really tall objects. And then at 62 feet, you get even more coverage. When the project first came in, it was proposed at 62 feet of height. The DRC definitely recommended towards a lower height, and so the applicant is now proposing that 52 feet for the antennas. The branches would go a little taller to 57, but the 52 feet is what is under consideration this evening, unless the Planning Commission wants to provide alternative direction. So there is a relatively successful eucalyptus tree in Paso Robles on Commerce Way. On the left, you see the tree from, that would be Scott Street. I've put it in red just in case you can't tell. Up close on the right, you can see the tree. It's just multi-branch. The branching is relatively good. It screens relatively well. Not a perfect tower, but does do a good job. If you're driving by, is here. On the left is the elevation that the DRC originally reviewed. It was a pretty narrow tree, pretty tall and narrow. We talked a lot about giving the tree a more natural appearance and having kind of an inverted triangle shape. The applicant sought the maker for the tower that's on Commerce Street and has found that maker, and so is proposing a tower using that same make. You can see on the right, this is a slightly less tall tower, and it is a wider tower to hopefully have a more realistic appearance. There are some additional conditions of approval that are provided in the draft resolution to address the appearance of the eucalyptus tree. One is that the branches would be about 3 feet wider than the antenna equipment. One of the things we see on some of the existing trees that are massed as, cell towers massed as trees in town is that the branches just don't extend far enough beyond the antennas. In addition, the branches would need to project at least 5 feet over the tower. That is shown in the drawings, but there you've got it in the conditions. There's a condition that there be at least 4 branches per foot in the branch portion of the tower in order to make sure there's enough branches to mass the equipment. Some conditions related to providing varying colors, that the equipment, the leaves would be varying colors. The wireless communication equipment should be clad with either foliage to match or painted a darker color. Some conditions about the bark cladding, and then as I mentioned, that the trees not be trimmed unless an arborist tells it that, I'm going to say that a little slower, that the trees not be trimmed below 45 feet in height unless they are determined to be a hazard, in order to keep the new faux tree looking a little bit more natural in the skyline. So there is an equipment enclosure also proposed on the ground. On the top right, the site plan, jumping back to that site plan, the yellow is the existing laundromat building. In red now is where the enclosure would be located. You can see in that elevation down at the bottom, the red area is the new enclosure. It is 24 feet long by 19 feet deep. The split face CMU block is proposed to be 8 feet in height. A chain link security topper was added based on feedback from the Development Review Committee. They were concerned about folks using the enclosure to hide their belongings or to sleep in. There are some chain link fence access gates that face Spring Street. Might be something that we want to discuss to make sure that those gates have adequate screening from Spring, although the enclosure is behind that laundry building, so limited view from Spring Street. And then all the parking that is displaced by this enclosure is being replaced. You can see in the site plan there, some of the parking spaces get shoved forward a little bit, but they do still exist, and the same number of parking spaces will be available after the project as before. So the DRC did request that a landscape plan be provided for. The laundromat building does not have any landscaping out front or very minimal landscaping. And so a landscape plan was requested. The landscape plan proposed is pretty simple. It's just a couple of shrub species and some new street trees. Really excited to see some new street trees in this part of town. They are nice, robust, a tall tree. The London plane tree will get nice and tall, which is a good thing. Put some pictures of the different shrub varieties that are proposed. Natal plum on the left, and then I'm I'm sure I'll get the name wrong, but variegated boxleaf eunomus, I'm guessing is how you would pronounce that. Mr. Kogler, you can probably correct me. And then, as I said, the London plane tree as well. So in order to approve this project, the Planning Commission would need to make some findings similar to the findings we saw in other projects, basically that the project is not detrimental to the neighborhood, it's not detrimental to our efforts to revitalize the downtown, and that it's compatible with all of the zoning ordinance requirements. In addition, there's some special findings that have to be made for wireless communication facilities, and these are also in the draft resolution, that the project complies with the design and development standards, and that the project encourages projects not to be located too close to residential uses, and that the project would have high quality stealthing design. This project is a freestanding cell tower, which is discouraged, but as I mentioned earlier, there really are no other facilities nearby that would be tall enough to house a cell tower in this area. So the project, staff is recommending that the project be determined to be categorically exempt from CEQA as a Class 3 exemption, which is for the construction of small structures, which does include accessory structures. The Planning Commission has options. You could approve the draft resolution provided for you that would approve the conditional use permit and make a finding that the project is exempt from CEQA. You could amend and approve the draft resolution. You could refer the project back to staff or the DRC, or you could deny the project based on a determination that the project does not meet one or more of the required findings. Staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission consider, I think the biggest question on this project is what is the appropriate height? It is a very tall structure proposed where there's not too many other tall structures in our town. And so I think an important consideration is whether this project is impractical or technologically infeasible at this height. Does it need to be at 52 feet in height? And if the Planning Commission can find that that is the case, that there are conditions that would require really high quality screening for this structure, and the Planning Commission could then approve the draft resolution that would approve the conditional use permit. That does complete my staff report, and I welcome your questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Katie. And the word of the day is euonymus, just in case you want to know.
Thank you.
So we've had a staff report. Any questions at this point, or should we let Mr. Ambrose come up and provide some commentary first? I think we're fine with that. If you'd like to approach us again and give us your thoughts.
Yeah, good evening again, Commissioners. Jerry Ambrose. I'm here on behalf of AT&T. This project also went to DRC, and we had a number of items to address, which we feel we have addressed. As Katie mentioned, the original height was 66 feet. We were able to work with the engineers and bring down the total height to 57 feet. And the engineers was accepting of that lowered height. It still meets the objectives that they need to meet for the network. The DRC also wanted some landscaping, and we're proposing to completely landscape the front of that otherwise barren piece of land in front of that smaller building on the property. Also, Katie mentioned that the DRC or staff asked us to mimic that existing faux eucalyptus tree that she showed on the screen. We did reach out to that company, and we did redesign the tower, and that company is going to be the selected vendor to construct or engineer this tower. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Planning Commission questions. Commissioner Christensen.
I just had one question. I was on DRC, and if I remember correctly, you guys also agreed to, I think Katie mentioned earlier, for the shape of the tree to seem a little bit more pronounced or bushy.
Correct.
More so than the one on Commerce, I think, was some of the comments we made. But
yeah, so we did that, and we did that by going to that exact company.
Right.
They have a different design.
Yeah. So, all right, thank you.
Mr. Neal.
I think I must have driven by the one on Commerce a couple of times. I didn't notice it, so that's a little embarrassing for me. But do we know how tall the one on Commerce is?
I think it's taller than this one. Katie would have to knows better.
I believe it's a 50-foot tall tree, unless, Darren, do you have a different memory?
I was going to say 50, Katie.
The maximum height in that zoning district is 50 feet, and that's my recollection.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, my recollection is a little different, but I honestly can't speak to it as I stand here.
Mr. Gibson.
Okay, so a couple of questions. So this is a 57-foot tree, and we're suggesting that the other trees not be trimmed below 45 feet. If we had a 42-foot tree, which I think was illustrated, we would then be trimming the surrounding trees to what?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of conditions that would need to be amended if we're going to reduce the height of the tree, and we could certainly go into those. But the recommendation was for it to be, I think we would recommend the trees not go any lower than 10 feet lower. So it would be, now I'm forgetting, I guess it'd be 35 feet if we were going to make that recommendation.
Yeah, I think that would be a problem. There's a lot of trees. That's a pretty short tree. So for the applicant, I just had a couple of questions on this one. I find it really interesting to take a tree, something like this, and make it look, real. So can you kind of give me some background on this? Like, what is the lifespan of a tree like this? And then could you just briefly go into how do you maintain a tree like this so it still, remains a tree? I mean, so there's wind and paint fades or whatever. How in 5 years, 10 years, how do you maintain this?
Yeah,
because you can't just paint a building, like you can't.
Right,
paint
understood. Yeah,
right.
the best way the way that's approached is through periodic maintenance visits. That's probably once every 6 weeks or so. They'll visit the site and see if something is askew and repair it. Some jurisdictions require us to come back to them for like a review of some type, either a staff level review or not usually planning commission, but they would have us, hey, in 5 years, check back in with us. We're going to look at that tower and make sure that the green is still green and the brown is still brown and the cladding is still there. And so there's a couple of different ways to approach that.
But literally, I can't imagine you replace individual leaves. So you just like replace branches that look like they're faded or something's happened to them, or how do you keep it looking like a tree?
I've never had that happen, I'll be honest with you. I guess you would replace because the branches are, connected to the tree and there's however they're connected there. I'm not aware of ever having to replace those, but I suppose if there was some kind of fading or something, I guess the city could make that determination.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Covarrubias.
Thank you. No questions. I was on DRC, and I think Jerry and his team did a good job of addressing all of our concerns then. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, I'm going to ask if it was drought tolerant.
Very.
No, I'm fine.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
No questions.
Okay. My only, I guess I don't have a question. I'll have a comment later. This is a public hearing. We will open the public hearing and seek comments. Is there anybody in the chamber this evening who would like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I'll ask, are there anybody who has phoned in?
No
None
callers.
either? Okay. Given that, we will close the public hearing, bring this back to the Planning Commission for discussion. Are there any discussion points anybody would like to make? And I'll just look up and down the line and ask you to note by the wave of a finger or something that you would like to say something. Mr. Covarrubias, do you have anything?
I'm good, sir. No,
Okay.
sir.
I would only say that if Mr. Neal is embarrassed, I lived in Meadowlark Farms area for a year, drove past this hundreds of times. I'm a retired landscape architect, and I never noticed it either. Oh, well. Okay.
Chairperson Kogler, I'd like to make a motion.
Commissioner Gibson, you have the floor.
I move to approve draft resolution 23-XXX, attachment 4, approving conditional use permit 22-02, based on findings and subject to site-specific conditions of approval.
We have a motion from Commissioner
I'll second
Gibson.
that.
We have a second from Mr. Christensen. Is there any discussion? I would only ask if, Darren, does that include the gate, or Katie, the gate that was talked about that faced kind of spring, but behind a building? How are we addressing that? There was an issue with that, I think, Katie, that you raised.
Yeah, it's unclear how much of a issue it would be. Currently, it is not addressed in the resolution, so you would want to add a condition if you want slats in the chain link or some other alternative gate or something that would block it. It's not currently in the resolution.
Is it truly completely hidden from spring by a building?
No, I don't think it is. Let me get to the site plan again. So as you can see, there is a.
I was just going to say, while we're waiting for Katie, I did confirm that the eucalyptus on Commerce is 65 feet. So Mr. Ambrose was more correct on that.
That was my
Okay. Do you have a thought on this, Katie? That was the only thing that came up in the discussion that I was curious about, especially since we had talked about some better enclosures on the previous cell tower.
Yes, so you can see there is a short site window as you drive by. If I understand correctly, and Mr. Ambrose, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that this is also, I don't know if you can see my mouse, there's an existing fence at the back of the laundry, and I believe it's also chain link. And so there would be a small site window back towards the gates of the enclosure.
Yeah, yes, I would say technically if you stopped and you stood there and you looked back in between, you could see it, but for the passerby, I mean, you wouldn't see it.
Okay.
Chairperson Kogler, I would concur. I drove by and even slowed down. It's very difficult to see past that edge.
I'm perfectly satisfied with that response. Okay. We have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Gibson?
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Neal?
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Okay, we have a few more agenda items to wrap up. Any discussion items by staff?
There are none.
Okay, we like that. We don't have a consent calendar. There were no minutes in our packet for this evening. That works well with our timing this evening. Item J, other reports. The first is the Paso Robles Streetscape Ad Hoc Committee report.
We're still trying to schedule a follow-up meeting.
Okay.
So
will you please reach out to us and ask us what dates might work?
Marcy will be doing that.
Perfect. All right, thank you. We have a Housing Constraints Opportunities Committee report. Maybe.
No report tonight.
Okay. How about, and then the DRC rotation schedule until we know the full complement of the commission. That won't be finalized. Are there any conflicts with what remains this month? There they are. Hearing none. We'll move on to Planning Commissioner comments. I'll start with Commissioner Covarrubias. Do you have comments?
Just real quick, just wanted to thank everybody. We always thank staff, but I also want to thank my fellow commissioners. Always amazing what I learned from each and every one of you guys, and it occurred during our first review item tonight again. So all the way up to the last minute. So wanted to thank you for that, and happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Davis.
I'll just echo Robert's comments. No, it's always a pleasure to be with you guys.
Does that mean we want to spend all of our Valentine's Days together in the future? Commissioner Jorgensen.
No comments.
Commissioner Christensen.
Oh, come on. You're all my Valentines tonight. That's it. Thanks.
Commissioner Neal.
No comments.
Commissioner Gibson.
No comment.
I have one comment that truly is of a serious nature, but I do feel somewhat compelled to make it. I spent the last 10 to 15 years of my career doing a lot of expert witness testimony on land use cases. And I can tell you that I frequently went to public records to find out what commissions said in events and things that they were reviewing. Anything that spoke of providing advice on legal issues, attorneys, who has rights, I would tell you to be very careful with that, because that is something that is mined frequently by those that are in litigation and used sometimes accordingly. So just be careful, think about what any of us say regarding litigation. And truthfully, when people say, I'm not an attorney, but they're probably going to say something that's of concern, and I've done that myself. So I would just add that as fodder for consideration. Okay, anything else? Then I would, staff comments, sorry.
Yes, so we're coming up on interviews for planning commissioners. The interviews will be this Thursday. Looks like the planning commission interviews will be starting at 6 p.m. We have two sitting candidates that have reapplied, and then it looks like we have two additional candidates. So I think there's going to be 4 interviews for 3 positions.
3 additional.
Is it 5 total? There's 5 total. So there's a question of the terms of this existing sitting commissioners. So your terms run through February 28th, so which is also our last meeting date. So we have one more meeting for this commission, and then the new commissioners, whoever they end up being, will then take their seats beginning on March 1st. We had been talking about having the reorganization dinner the last Sunday of February, because that's how we always do it. But because of this conflict, Marcy and I have been discussing, we're probably going to end up actually moving it to the first Sunday in March, just so we don't create this overlap situation. But we're going to confirm all that and let you know in the next day or so. So stay tuned on that. The Planning Commission Academy, the League of California Cities training session is Wednesday, March 29th. It's down in the Anaheim Resort in the Disneyland area. So I think we've sent out some information on that. We will be sending that information out. So if you're interested, let us know so we can, get rooms booked and that sort of thing. The Stravinsky Dow project that you made a recommendation on, that's on council agenda next week. And it looks like Cheval 2, apartment project on Rolling Hills, and the Triana Winery probably will be on some of your upcoming agendas in the next couple weeks. And I think that's it.
All right, I think that wraps up all the agenda items unless somebody has something to add and or offer a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Jorgensen, seconded by Commissioner Davis. All in favor, aye? Aye.
Aye.
We're done. Thank you all. Happy Valentine's Day.